Chapter 324. At this point, Roland also had a general plan for the security system of his territory in the future. The current population of Border Town was about 20,000 people. In addition to the local natives, there were also people from Longsong's stronghold and refugees from the eastern region. When the envoy sent by Barav returned, they might even bring a group of people from the southern and northern parts of the kingdom. The composition of the population would become more complicated, and the quality would also be uneven. Conflicts like today's would only increase. Therefore, he also needed to establish a public security system to replace the current patrol work of the First Army. Sooner or later, internal violence and external violence would be separated. He had also considered this problem before, but because of the lack of manpower, he gave up. Now the First Army needed to focus on fighting the demonic beasts, and the population was growing rapidly, so it was time to implement this plan. The first trial would be final, and the first trial would be final. The public security would arrest criminals in accordance with the law and handle civil disputes. The Security Bureau would be responsible for maintaining the purity of the system, which could effectively avoid power corruption. At the same time, it could also use public security personnel to carry out cleaning operations, saving manpower and resources. This was the outline of the public security system that Roland envisaged. The most ideal situation was to first test this public security system in Border Town, and when the city was built next year, it would be promoted to the entire western region. At that time, whether it was an autonomous territory of the nobility or not, it would have to implement the same set of laws and accept the control of a unified department. He was the only one who could be above the law. Roland knew that he was the largest noble in the western region, so he could not say that everyone was equal before the law, nor could he abolish the aristocratic system. But he could at least make it so that there were no traditional feudal nobles in his city. If he wanted to receive the protection of the western region, he would have to hand over his autonomous power. As for the person in charge of the public security department, Roland had already thought about it. Chief Knight Carter Lannis, who was full of a sense of justice but did not act pedantically, was a good choice. When Vader hobbled back to his temporary residence, the old man Kakasim immediately came to greet him. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," he said with a grin. "His Highness sentenced me to 10 lashes. "Let me see you," Kakasim said eagerly. "Let's talk in the house." Vader walked into the house. A warm aura immediately dispelled the chill in his body. He closed the door. It was as if the inside and the outside world were two different worlds. Compared to the previous wooden shack that leaked wind and rain everywhere, this somewhat low and narrow mud hut was actually more comfortable. By the way, the locals seem to call these houses cave dwellings. The old man asked him to lie down on the stove bed. Then, he peeled off the clothes on his back and couldn't help but gasp. "Your back is covered in blood. I'll go get some ash for you." "No, please don't. This is just a blood stain from the torture. The bleeding has already stopped. Sir Knight said that it's better to leave it open like this. It'll only take 2 or 3 days for the wound to heal." 2 or 3 days, Kakasim shook his head worriedly. "No, child, you may fall into a high fever and your back will swell up. Even if your body is strong, it will take you at least a week to recover. You should know better than me what happens when the disease flares up." "You may not believe it," he licked his somewhat dry lips. "I don't feel much pain from the wound on my back. On the contrary, I feel a cool and itchy feeling. This is a sign of healing." After the lashes, they poured a bucket of water on my back. "Salt water." The old man frowned. "I thought so at first, but the expected burning pain didn't come." Vader chuckled twice. "The knight who carried out the punishment said that this water can eliminate all pathogenic microorganisms. If you want the wound to heal quickly, don't do anything unnecessary and just let it dry." "Pathogenic microorganisms what?" "Microorganisms," he curled his lips, "who knows what they are? It's probably related to witches." The old man lowered his head, and after a long time, he said in a deep voice, "You shouldn't have stood up for me. As long as you bear with it, if you bear with it, you'll suffer even more severe treatment." I know what kind of person that guy is, or rather, most of the nobles are the same. Vader spat. I heard that the snow here will last for several months. Even if we add up the money we have, we won't be able to last until then. He paused. Moreover, I deliberately chose that time to beat him. Deliberately. Kakasim was startled. Because every day at this time, His Royal Highness will appear at the western city wall. Since he promised to provide free food, he must hate this kind of behavior that tarnishes his reputation. This is also the most effective method. If it was just a simple fight, it might not even reach His Royal Highness' ears. After all, Koya Jarvis may have been instigated by someone. If the officials of the City Hall want to suppress this news, it would be useless no matter what we say. But it's also possible that he was instigated by the Lord. The possibility is extremely low. If His Royal Highness wants to save money, he can directly reduce the 3 meals to 2. Moreover, I have inquired in advance. Whether it is the local residents or the serfs, they are all full of praise for His Royal Highness' benevolence and wisdom. He smiled proudly. You see, I didn't bet wrongly, did I? So that's how it is. The old man let out a long sigh. You've really seen through it thoroughly. But there was also a part where he didn't guess correctly, Vader thought, and that was the punishment. As a patrol member who had worked in Valencia for more than 10 years, he had a deep understanding of the ugliness under the city's glamorous appearance. He had seen more than a dozen nobles who used their power to extort money, and it even happened in the patrol team from time to time. Therefore, it wasn't difficult for him to deal with these high and mighty nobles. His Royal Highness's reaction was basically as he had expected. Only the punishment was beyond Vader's expectations. In this case, a lord who loved his reputation would mostly judge the bullied innocent, but he had punished everyone. Compared to his reputation, His Royal Highness seemed to care more about the system. For a lord who was used to doing as he pleased, this was indeed a rare quality. What do you plan to do next? The old man asked after a moment of silence. I will rest for 2 days, as Sir Knight specially approved. After that, I will continue to do what I did before, helping those guys who carry strange weapons to do some miscellaneous work. You could have lived in the inner city and lived a decent life with the craftsmen. But you can't go in, Kakasim. Don't talk about this anymore. He shook his head. I won't leave you outside. This old man was neither his family nor his elder. Half a year ago, he was still a prisoner locked up in prison. Everyone knew that the old man was pushed out by the black street rats to be used as a scapegoat. But this kind of thing was common, so the patrol team was simply too lazy to care. Later on, Valencia was ransacked by a large group of pirates. He was originally going to die in this turmoil, but at the critical moment, the old man hid him in a cell and covered his body with a smelly bedsheet. Finally, he was lucky enough to escape. Vader didn't expect that he would actually be rescued by a prisoner who he usually didn't even want to look at. He suddenly understood that there was no difference between him and those disgusting nobles. The other 2 people in the room both knew Kakasim's identity. It would be fine with him watching over him, but once he was gone, they would definitely find trouble with the old man. Don't worry, everything will get better. Vader patted the other's shoulder. 2 days later, he heard news from the inner city that His Royal Highness was recruiting public security members. To be continued. Chapter 325. Hey, girls, do you want a bowl of fish soup? Captain Jack stuck his head into the cabin and curled the pipe in his mouth. Just now a lucky guy caught a large tailless trout. Thank you, Tilly Wimbledon nodded. We'll be right there. Fish soup again. After the captain left, Ashes sighed. What's so good about this tasteless thing? You can add more salt to the bowl, Breeze chuckled. Pepper is also fine, but it's more expensive. I'm afraid Mr. Jack won't put it in for you. Don't put anything in it. The boiled soup is close to the original taste, and it also tests the quality of the food itself. Andrea elegantly combed her light blonde hair. Lady Tilly, let's go to the captain's cabin. As long as it's hot, Shavy, the shortest, muttered. My toes are freezing. The group of people went up the stairs from the bottom of the Charming Beauty to the poop. Jack One-Eye was standing by the porthole, looking at the white track that was rolling and spreading behind the ship. This damn weather, how did it suddenly become so cold? He blew out a ring of smoke. Three gods, it's only mid-autumn. Maybe the gods are asleep. Ashes shrugged. Bah, you can't say that at sea, Captain Jack grinned. The sea god is always staring at us. He made a blessing gesture on his chest. Forget it, let's not think about it. Let's have a bowl of fish soup to warm our stomachs first. In order to enjoy warm food in the captain's cabin, he didn't hesitate to make a big hole in the floor. He put a brazier in the center of the hole and filled it with sand to prevent it from igniting the whole ship. A large pot of fish soup was boiling and bubbling on the brazier, making a gurgling sound. The fragrance filled the whole room. Just like that, the six of them took off their shoes and sat around the brazier. Their feet were buried in the warm sand, allowing their cold toes to fully touch the sand and enjoy the warmth brought by the charcoal fire. Tilly took the fish soup handed by the captain and gently blew on it. The steaming soup was different from the milky white soup made of blacktail fish. This bowl of soup was dark yellow, and the oil floated on the surface, reflecting a crystal luster. When she saw the occasional specks of green and white in the soup, she knew that the old captain had taken out all the goods from the bottom of the box. The ship often sailed for several months, making it difficult for the crew to eat fresh vegetables and fruits. These tender shallots were obviously preserved with ice saltpeter. The fragrance of the shallots neutralized the fishy smell of the fish. Paired with the ginger slices and a bit of ale, all that was left was a rich, mellow, and delicious taste. Tilly drank the fish soup slowly. Every time the soup was about to burn her tongue, she would pause for a moment and take a few deep breaths. With every sip, she could clearly feel that the soup that she drank was like a warm current that flowed down her throat all the way to her stomach, causing her stomach to become warm. The chill soon faded, and she even felt her body slightly heat up. Try adding some chili, Jack pointed to the crock with seasoning next to the brazier. The taste will be more special, and it will especially drive away the cold. It's even more effective than wine. Although the true essence of food is the original taste, I have to say that these ingredients are just right, and the taste is not bad at all, Andrea praised. Aren't you going to drink? Tilly looked at Ashes. The latter waved her hand. Forget it, I really can't stand the fishy smell of sea fish. At first, Tilly could not accept the fjord's people's habit of eating fish. Any meal could not be without a variety of fish. Not to mention the conventional grilled, boiled, and fried fish, there were also strange methods such as fish jelly, fish sauce, and caviar. However, after forcing herself to eat several times at formal banquets, she found that the taste was actually not bad. Once she became familiar with the fishy smell of the sea, it could further enhance the taste of the food itself. Like dried fish, grilled cuttlefish, and even fried smelly fish, which had a pungent smell, she could now slowly try them. Our Miss Ashes has been spoiled by the barbaric cooking methods of Border Town. Andrea covered her mouth and said, it's a pity that after tasting spices and refined salt, she not only lost the ability to distinguish delicious food, but now it seems that even her courage is gone. What did you say? Ashes glared at her. Why, isn't that the case? Andrea let out a series of laughter. Just a little fishy smell is enough to make you flinch. You are as willful as a little girl. How can we expect you to stand up for Lady Tilly when she needs you? So that's how it is. It seems that you really want to provoke me into a fight with you. Ash's tone suddenly calmed down. Give up, Border Town has a terrible weapon, much more powerful than your arrows. Even so, I still won the competition. So if you want to take away the position of Lady Tilly's personal guard from me, you still have to practice for a few more years. She paused, or maybe for a lifetime. Ashes raised the corner of her mouth. In addition, the food invented by His Highness Roland is not just a superposition of spices and refined salt, you will understand when you taste it. But remember not to drip your saliva on your clothes, Lady Tilly can't afford to lose face. Nonsense, that's you. Tilly couldn't help but laugh out loud. These two were the top witches on Sleeping Island, and they often fought fiercely for who was the strongest, but she knew that both Ashes and Andrea were her best subordinates. When danger came, they would not hesitate to fight side by side and build the impregnable walls of Sleeping Island together. The dispute between the two made the atmosphere in the room lively. Seeing this scene, Tilly couldn't help but think of the 5 witches who had been sent to Border Town. She wondered if they were doing well in her brother's territory. At this moment, the charming beauty suddenly shook violently without warning. "Be careful." Ashes pulled Princess Tilly away. The iron pot on the brazier was overturned, the soup extinguished the charcoal fire, and the fish fell all over the floor. Then there was a sharp whistle outside the cabin. "Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" A sailor rushed into the captain's cabin and shouted in panic, "Mr. Captain, there is more than one mutant sea ghost." "Isn't sea ghost another name for demonic beasts?" Tilly was startled. How could they come to this place? They ran out of the poop deck and saw more than a dozen fish monsters with crab feet on the deck, and some were climbing onto the charming beauty from both sides of the ship. They moved quickly, and when they moved, they looked like giant cockroaches. The waving human arms on both sides of their heads were so powerful that they could break a sailor's neck. "Since you don't want to accept the challenge, let's have a competition." Andrea snapped her fingers, and a golden light emerged from between her fingers, turning into the shape of a bow. She held it firmly in her hand. "Whoever kills the most monsters will be the most powerful one." "It doesn't matter." Ashes pulled out the strangely shaped giant sword from her back. "I'm going." Chapter 326. Tilly injected her magic power into the stone of flight and leaped into the air, overlooking the entire deck. Most of the crew members of the Charming Beauty were experienced sailors. After the initial panic, they picked up their weapons and fought against the demonic beasts, gradually moving closer to the poop. Obviously, they also knew that they could not defeat so many enemies by themselves. Their only hope lay in the witches on the ship. After Ashes joined the battle, the situation quickly changed. She was like a gust of wind, and wherever she went, there were screams and wails of monsters. Any demonic beast that dared to face her giant sword would be cut in half, and their severed limbs would fall all over the deck. Andrea was not to be outdone. Her magic longbow could turn any object into an arrow, and its power and accuracy were astonishing. Therefore, she rarely prepared a conventional arrow, but a bag of glass beads. The demonic beasts hit by her didn't even have the chance to scream, they just twitched and fell to the ground. The hard marbles were enough to penetrate their skulls within 20 steps and turn their skulls into a paste. Breeze and Shavy walked back and forth on the deck, helping the injured sailors. With the protection of an invisible barrier, the demonic beasts could not get close to them. Seeing that the demonic beasts were quickly killed, Tilly still did not relax her vigilance. These fish-shaped monsters were obviously not enough to cause the violent shaking of the Charming Beauty at the beginning. It felt like a huge monster was hitting the bottom of the ship underwater. Without the protection of Molly's servants, the ship would probably become a pile of broken planks floating in the sea if this happened a few more times. The witches could barely protect themselves, but it was estimated that only a few sailors could escape the fate of being buried in the stomach of the fish. Just as she had expected, when the last demonic beast was flattened by Ash's sword, a huge shadow appeared in the water in front of the ship's hull. It was definitely not the size of a fish. The shadow quickly approached the surface of the water and rushed towards the Charming Beauty. "Be careful," she shouted. Before she could finish her words, the shadow passed under the ship, and the ship shook violently again. The two masts made a series of frightening sounds, as if they would collapse at any time. Fortunately, the shadow did not make any other attack movements and quickly disappeared into the depths of the sea. It probably wanted to use its back to knock the Charming Beauty over and then eat its fill. Tilly landed back on the deck and briefly explained the situation to them. "We have to force it out of the sea. Otherwise, this damned monster will sink the ship sooner or later." Ashes frowned. "I'll try," Shavi said. Since it's coming close to the bottom of the ship, as long as it's close enough, I can use a barrier to block its impact. O God of the sea, old Jack wiped the sweat off his forehead. If the opponent is really as huge as Lady Tilly said, normal attacks won't have much effect. Even if we force it out of the sea, how are we going to kill it? Leave it to me. Andrea tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear and revealed a confident smile. Within 10 steps, no enemy can take a full blow from me. The shadow soon appeared, but this time it changed its direction and rushed towards the charming beauty from the stern. Tilly, who was monitoring from the air, immediately sent out a warning signal. Shavi ran to her position and jumped out of the ship. Her waist was firmly tied with several coils of hemp rope. The other end of the rope was held in Ash's hand, which was used to steadily control the monster's descending height. When the shadow attacked, Shavi instantly opened her barrier, and a gap suddenly appeared in the gray sea, as if it was separated by something invisible. The monster hit the barrier, and its huge body suddenly stopped. Shavi let out a muffled groan, and her hands hung limply, as if she had consumed a great deal of strength. The shadow under her feet rapidly expanded, and the sea suddenly rose. Quickly pull her up. Tilly swooped down and shouted. Ashes pulled Shavi up with one hand, and just as she pulled her onto the deck, a huge sea beast roared and rushed out of the water. The raised waves made the charming beauty sway from side to side. At first glance, it looked like a cross between a sharp-toothed shark and an octopus. Several tentacles stretched out from its triangular head, and directly hit the deck. Even listening to the sound, it was obvious that it was extremely angry at this inexplicable collision. Its tentacles, which were as thick as an adult's thigh, swept the railing into a mess, but it was unable to break through the defense that Shavi had put up. Andrea. Ashes bent down, her fingers clasped together, and her hands formed a bowl-shaped shape. Come, the latter stepped on Ash's palm, leave everything to me. The extraordinary forcefully threw her out, and in the blink of an eye, she had already flown above the monster's head. She summoned her magic bow and pulled the string to its fullest. Suddenly, a dazzling light burst out from between the bow and the string. This light was like the sun peeking out of the clouds, and the sea was reflected in a golden color. Go! Lightning flashed, and this arrow made of pure magic let out an ear-piercing sound, as if it was thunder itself, and entered the monster's body. The monster's grayish-brown skin suddenly swelled up, and golden cracks spread all over its body. From its body, a ray of light emerged, and then with a loud bang, it exploded into pieces. The huge explosion stirred up a circle of ripples on the surface of the sea. The black blood was like ink, dyeing the sea black, and the exploded internal organs fell like rain. The tentacles that were originally wrapped around the ship curled up, and together with the monster whose head had been blown off, they sank to the bottom of the sea. Andrea fell into the sea with a splash. Ah, help, help, I can't swim, Gulu, someone help me. Ashes looked at the tired face of Shavi, and helplessly sighed. Really an idiot who only knows how to act cool. She untied the giant sword on her back, dived into the sea, and swam towards the monster. Tilly finally breathed a sigh of relief. The threat of the sinking ship had been removed, and at least she didn't have to worry about swimming to Border Town. Suddenly, she felt the tip of her nose become cold, and when she raised her head, she couldn't help but freeze in place. She didn't know when, but she saw snowflakes floating in the gray sky, like fairies flying all over the sky, covering her entire field of vision. This is snow. Breeze stared at the melting ice crystal in his hand. Does it snow in Grey Castle in autumn? Oh, I was wondering why it got colder the further west we went. One-eyed Jack took out his pipe and lit it again. It seems that you really live in an abyss of suffering. Tilly didn't answer, but her expression was solemn. Breeze came from the Kingdom of Dawn, where it was spring all year round. Old Jack was from the fjords, and even in winter, it was rare to see heavy snow. But for the western region of Grey Castle, snow had a special meaning. The court tutor had said that this snow was endless, accompanied by the horns of the demons' invasion. It symbolized the beginning of the months of demons, and would not subside until the end of the months of demons. Although the months of demons never had a fixed end date, it usually began in winter. Could it be that Border Town was already under the attack of the demonic beasts? Moreover, the water ghosts in the sea only appeared east of Burning Fire Island, and now there were traces of them even in the southernmost corner. I don't know if the merchant ships going to and from the mainland of the kingdom will be attacked by this group of monsters. Tilly became more and more worried. After sailing in the heavy snow for 2 days, they finally saw the hazy coastline. Chapter 327. Is this the place where you docked last time? Tilly asked, looking at the towering rock wall in front of them. After seeing the coastline, the charming beauty had been sailing along the shore to the west until they reached the beach, when Ashes shouted to stop the ship. Well, look, she pointed to the top of the mountain. Tilly looked in the direction she was pointing and saw 2 orange flags fluttering in the wind. Although the last time we came here it was still a beach, but the 2 flags show that we didn't go the wrong way. I also remember it, old Jack said with a pipe in his mouth, but last time they carried a huge balloon to transport all the witches over the cliff. How are you going to cross it? A huge balloon? Tilly asked curiously. Yes, it can fly when it is filled with hot air, Ashes nodded. It is said that it is an invention of His Highness Roland. The principle is to use the rising force of hot air to lift the balloon and the people into the sky. The 5th princess looked a little complicated. The court tutor didn't teach us these things. Then she spat out a white breath. Anyway, we will see him soon, and then we will naturally know the result. Let's go ashore. Are you sure you don't want to wait for him to pick you up on the ship? The captain shook off the ash. What about this cliff? Leave it to Shavy, Tilly smiled. Because this was a naturally formed coast, no one knew the depth of the seabed, so the charming beauty didn't dare to get too close, and could only send people to the shallows by releasing a landing boat. After the group stepped on the thick snow, Tilly looked at Jack one-eyed. Mr. Captain, then I will have to trouble you to wait here for 3 or 4 days. Lotus and the others still need your help to send back to Sleeping Island. Of course, the captain replied, without you on board, I don't dare to go back the way we came. God knows if those mutated water ghosts will come to the door again. Tilly walked to the edge of the cliff and used the magic stone's ability to fly directly to the top of the mountain, observing the surrounding situation. The terrain behind the mountain was much higher than the shallows, and it was almost level with the top of the mountain, which meant that they only needed to climb, not to land. The height of the mountain wall was about 50 steps, and the magic consumption would be greatly increased when the barrier was used to push objects, but such a small distance should not be difficult for Shavy. She slowly landed beside the 4 of them. Shavy, I'll have to trouble you with the 3 of them. Yes, Lady Tilly. The latter patted her chest with a smile and then summoned an invisible barrier. After 2 days of rest, she had already recovered from resisting the fierce impact of the giant beast at the bottom of the sea. When everyone stepped on the invisible barrier, she activated her magic and made it rise slowly. After a while, they went over the top of the mountain. Then, under the guidance of Ashes, the group spent half a day and finally arrived at Border Town. The first thing that entered Tilly's eyes was a uniquely shaped steel bridge. It sat on the wide river, and there were only 2 piers at the bottom. Other than the neatly arranged iron beams and pillars, there were no unnecessary decorations or patterns on its body. The snow covering the bridge formed a sharp contrast with the exposed black bridge. At first glance, there was an indescribable grandeur. This bridge is really big, Breeze exclaimed. How many iron ingots did they melt to build a bridge like this? It's really a waste of materials. Obviously, a pontoon bridge could solve the problem of passage. What's the point of building such a high bridge? Ashes disagreed. Border Town itself is the last stop of the merchant fleet. Do you think there are ships that want to go to the source of the river to do business? Ignorant remarks, Andrea elegantly shook her index finger. Even if I'm not from Greycastle, I can still see that the woodland in the west is quite valuable for reclamation. There are no towns now, but that doesn't mean there won't be any in the future. If you want to continue to expand your territory, expanding into an uninhabited area is the best choice. At that time, the pontoon bridge will become a blockage for the river transportation. Lady Tilly's brother obviously thinks more long-term than you do. Ashes raised her eyebrows. Before, you called him a vulgar aristocrat who likes barbaric cooking, but now you call him Lady Tilly's brother. The word vulgar aristocrat was added by you. The blonde witch turned her head disdainfully. In addition, long-term vision and barbaric cooking don't conflict, so you don't have to sow discord in front of Lady Tilly. Tilly didn't pay attention to the routine dispute between the two. Instead, she turned her eyes to the other side of the river. She noticed an incredible phenomenon. At this time, the sky was still snowing, and the temperature was no different from winter. It was reasonable to say that at this time, the townspeople should be hiding in their homes, either around the stove or curled up under the quilt. Even in King's City, there weren't many people on the streets in winter. The cold would accelerate the loss of physical strength. If you wanted to keep your body warm, you had to eat more than usual, not to mention the risk of catching a cold. Therefore, except for the necessary food and drink, the vast majority of civilians always avoided taking any action in winter. However, there were constantly people coming and going by the river. Some of them were pushing carts, while others were carrying large bags. Their footsteps were hurried, and it seemed that they were working. Tilly didn't find any supervisors with whips around them. That was to say, these people were working completely voluntarily. How is this possible? After crossing the iron bridge, 2 guards carrying strange spears immediately came over. They were wearing the same uniform, and seemed to be in high spirits. Their demeanor was completely different from the usual patrols in big cities. "Stop, why are you coming from the south?" One of them carefully looked at them for a moment. "Wait, you are witches?" This question made Tilly slightly startled. Although she already knew that the existence of witches had been made public in this town, but when she personally heard an ordinary person ask such a question in such a calm tone, her heart still set off a burst of waves. "Yes, we are witches." "You want to join the Witch Cooperation Association?" The guard laughed. "Please wait here, I will immediately report to the higher-ups." "Wait?" "No, this is..." "Okay, we will wait here." Tilly stretched out her hand to interrupt Ash's words. "Also, can I ask what these people are busy with?" "Ah, they are repairing the dock. Because of the sudden snowfall, a lot of things have been messed up. As for what they are doing specifically, I am not clear." When the guard returned to his post, Ashes puzzledly asked, "Why didn't you tell them your identity? Aren't you curious? How will he receive a witch from another city?" Tilly playfully blinked her eyes. Not long after, a tall and slender woman dressed in white walked over. She had long, curly blonde hair and an impeccable appearance. Even if she couldn't see her magic, Tilly could feel the sharp aura emanating from her body, just like an unsheathed blade. There was no doubt that this person was a combat witch, and an extremely powerful one at that. "I really thought that there was a new witch who wanted to join the Witch Cooperation Association. Didn't you return to Sleeping Island?" She first looked at Ashes, and then swept her eyes over the crowd. When her eyes fell on Tilly, she suddenly froze. In an instant, the sharp feeling disappeared, and was replaced by a watery warmth. "Hello, my name is Nightingale," she nodded in greeting. "You must be Tilly Wimbledon, His Highness Roland's sister, right?" To be continued. Chapter 328. Lady Tilly. Led by Nightingale, they walked into the Lord's castle. The 5th princess did not expect that the first person to come out to greet her would be Sylvie. She happily ran towards her, and without paying her respects, she bent down and hugged her. "Why did you come? It's still autumn." "It's no different from winter," Tilly said with a smile. "Where are the others?" "Lotus is building houses for the refugees, Evelyn and Candle should still be in the industrial area at this time, and Honey is training messengers in the back garden." Sylvie counted with her fingers. "His Highness has already sent someone to inform them." "Don't worry, I think you'll see them soon," a familiar yet very strange voice sounded from behind Sylvie. Tilly looked up and saw a gray-haired man smiling at her. His appearance hadn't changed much from her memory, but his smile and demeanor were completely different from before. "Welcome to Border Town, my dear sister." Tilly's mind was in turmoil. There were too many doubts she wanted to blurt out, but her face remained calm, and she followed Roland Wimbledon into a room that looked like a study. "Please sit down." The man poured a cup of warm black tea and handed it to her. "I haven't seen you for a whole year. I know you have a lot to talk to me about, and I do the same. But don't worry," he looked out the window at the snowy scenery, "this year's winter is still very long." She held the cup and didn't answer, but sat at the mahogany table, quietly looking at the fourth prince. Just this opening speech, Tilly felt that it wasn't her impression of her brother. He was weak and timid, outwardly strong but inwardly weak, and most importantly, he was used to evading, never thinking of facing head-on. The Roland Wimbledon in front of her was completely different. He was trying to take the initiative in the conversation. Although his tone was soft and gentle, it was completely the style of a superior. "Nightingale," Roland tilted his head. "But your highness." The voice of the witch came from the room. "It doesn't matter, she's my sister." "All right." Nightingale was silent for a moment, then she appeared and left the room unhappily. "Now it's just me and you," he smiled and returned to the square table. Tilly was silent for a moment. "You? Who are you?" She thought he would hesitate or pretend to be mysterious, but he answered so quickly, "I'm your brother, Roland Wimbledon, the fourth Prince of Greycastle." Then he laughed. "I know I've changed a lot, but I'm willing to explain it to you slowly." Tilly suddenly remembered what he had written in his letter. "As for what made me make this decision, and what made me no longer as indifferent to everything as I used to be, these trifles can be discussed in detail when the opportunity arises." It was probably this sentence that made her decide to come to this remote town. She couldn't help but raise the corner of her mouth. "I'll listen carefully." The whole story wasn't complicated, but it was very exciting. After listening to Roland's experience after he was entheft to Border Town, Tilly found that her teacup was already empty. She let out a long sigh and went over the story again. Simply speaking, a witch named Anna touched Roland. Through the witch he saved, he saw the evil of the church and how it bewitched the people. Then Garcia's assassination made him feel the darkness under the power of the royal family. Even if he hid in a corner, he still couldn't escape the malice. Finally, he decided to change everything. Although this part sounded a bit dramatic, it could barely be considered an explanation. But the problem lied in the strange knowledge. Whether it was the steam engine or the flintlock, it was impossible to know them just because of a moment's comprehension. "So, the ultimate cause of all this is the memory you said suddenly appeared in your head?" Tilly asked. "Yes," Roland said seriously, "I know it's hard to believe, but it's the truth. I was lucky enough to escape the assassination of my third sister, and when I woke up from my coma, I understood all of this. If meeting Anna was the trigger, then the content of the memory is the help I want to change the status quo." "Is it a witch?" Tilly thought. The possibility of replacement and control is not big. Sylvie has already confirmed this. The ability of the witches of the Witch Cooperation Association is not mysterious. They have to carry out special training every day. No one's ability belongs to these two categories, not even a little bit close. The only possibility is occupation. She can't rule out the possibility of such an ability. By occupying the other person's body, she can obtain the other person's thoughts. But this speculation is also uncertain. Even if Roland Wimbledon is not favored by his father, he is still the unquestionable Prince of Greycastle. The God's Stone of Retaliation is not rare for him, and he always has the protection of the knight and his personal guards, so it is impossible for a witch without the ability to hide to easily get close to him. Moreover, even if there is such a witch, how could she know so many extraordinary things? When she was a child, she had searched through the palace library, and also received the teachings of several white-haired, erudite court mentors, but even they had never talked about using steam and snow powder to replace the knowledge of animal power and swords. So it seems that the bizarre knowledge and the bizarre experience are somewhat compatible. How can you prove that you are Roland Wimbledon, and not the extra memory? Tilly knew that this question is quite rude. If it were the previous prince, he would certainly fly into a rage, flip the table and leave. Because I still remember the things that happened in the palace, the other side's tone is still calm. I think that the essence of a person is the unique memory. If a witch becomes exactly the same as you, but the memory is different, she is still essentially another person. I have a lot of strange memories, but I don't remember where these memories came from. And your crying expression when I threw you on the broken glass is still vivid in my mind, so, this is proof. He paused. Of course. I haven't had the time to apologize to you. I hope it's not too late. Tilly was silent. The Roland in front of her was clean, and his expression was sincere, as if he was telling an unquestionable fact. Obviously, no matter from what point of view, he is much better than the previous prince, but in my heart, I still have doubts. It's really unbelievable. It's normal. Roland seemed to see through her thoughts. A lot of things are inconceivable before you personally experience them. I didn't expect that my sister would actually awaken as a witch and hide it from everyone in the palace. But, as I said at the beginning, this winter is still very long. We can slowly get to know each other. This is probably the most suitable solution for now. Tilly nodded. Then for the next few months. I'll trouble you. Leave it to me. You'll like it here. To be continued. Your support is my greatest motivation. 198300124. Chapter 329. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go. Shaw.net provides you with wonderful novels to read. After Tilly left the office, Roland let out a long breath. Obviously, speaking nonsense in front of a smart person was a very stressful thing, especially when one had to maintain a sincere expression the entire time. Fortunately, Nightingale's report gave him a moment of respite. All the witches of Sleeping Island had returned to the castle, so Roland took the opportunity to end the conversation. What do you think? Do you have a special feeling facing your own sister, a witch? Nightingale turned over and sat on the table, looking down at the prince. The latter rolled his eyes and grumpily said, "Is great pressure considered a special feeling?" "I thought it was going to be a touching reunion," she said, pursing her lips. "I don't have a good relationship with her." Roland sighed. "I often bullied her in the palace. When she grew up, she was no different from a stranger. It's already a pleasant surprise that she could come here." "Oh," she said meaningfully, "you won't be alone with other strange witches. I see that you trust her." "That's because I don't want you to see me lying." Roland didn't answer. He refilled his teacup, leaned back in his chair, and slowly took a sip. "In short, you will understand in the future." Nightingale reached out and touched his lips. "You'll tell me everything, right?" "I'll accept this promise," she said with a chuckle, then disappeared in front of Roland. Roland leaned back in his chair and recalled the entire conversation, looking for any possible loopholes. This was also the most suitable explanation he could think of. Years of work experience told him that the more lies he made up, the less they would stand up to scrutiny. Therefore, it would be difficult for him to justify his claims of deliberately hiding his abilities when he was young, finding ancient books by accident, or being taught by a hermit. In addition to being his sister, the other party was also the leader of the witch organization. Before the two sides formed a stable alliance, any exposed lies would bring a heavy blow to the trust. So, he chose to tell the truth about the details that could be exposed, and the additional knowledge was all attributed to the sudden memory. Although it sounded incredible, compared to the even more incredible transmigration, at least there were not too many negative effects, and it could not be falsified. If it was the latter, it was hard to say whether she could accept a stranger from another world. As long as he insisted that he was the fourth prince of Greycastle, no one could deny it. And what she wanted was probably an explanation from his own mouth. Roland knew in his heart that an outstanding leader would not always be entangled in the past. The most important thing was to work together and move forward. This winter would allow her to see the broad prospects of the Western region, as well as his sincerity in cooperating with her. This could be considered a successful meeting. As for the relationship between them, there would be plenty of time to repair it in the future. In the evening, a grand banquet was held in the castle hall. Not to mention the common pepper steak, fried eggs, and white bread, all kinds of white wine, pan-fried bird beak mushrooms, steamed dumplings, and ice cream all appeared on the stage, raising the taste of the dishes to a new level. At the same time, the concept of fancy platters was introduced. A large porcelain plate was filled with a small piece of staple food drizzled with sauce. The visual effect was excellent, and it made people feel hungry at first glance. In the interlacing of toasts and candlelight, the banquet finally ended in a harmonious and lively atmosphere. Next was the more formal meeting. In the living room, the fireplace was blazing. Roland and the members of the Witch Union sat in a long row at the long table, while Tilly and the witches of Sleeping Island sat in the opposite row. Due to the sensitivity of her identity, Maggie simply turned into a pigeon and squatted on the chandelier overhead. Tilly was the first to speak. This time, in addition to helping Border Town resist the invasion of the demonic beasts, I also intend to bring back the 5 witches that were previously sent here. She gave a general description of the current situation on Sleeping Island. Next spring, a group of ordinary people will move into the island from Silver Moon Bay. We will have to rely on Lotus and Honey to provide additional housing and food. Roland suddenly felt a headache. The first army could resist the demonic beasts. Except for the agile and high-speed hybrids, there was almost no need for witches. But in terms of construction, the role of the witches was irreplaceable. Currently, the mountain ridge at the port had not yet been opened, the dock was only half built, and he still wanted to build a few more groups of cave dwellings. Can it be delayed for another half a month? I really want to agree, but the situation has changed. Tilly shook her head helplessly. A mutated water ghost has appeared in the southern cape. You can think of it as a fish species of demonic beast. I suspect that all of this is related to the months of demons. It is said that the longer the months of demons, the more ferocious the demonic beasts will be, so it will be safer for them to travel earlier. They are not suitable to fight. I know, so Breeze will escort them on the ship. Her ability is very effective in dealing with enemies with low intelligence. Moreover, we do not intend to return the way we came. Instead, we will go north along the coastline, and when we arrive at the port of Clearwater, we will take the usual commercial route to Sleeping Island. According to the news from the Bird Messenger, there are no demonic beasts on the route between the fjords and the kingdom. Roland had to make a final effort. In addition to Lotus and Honey, can the other 3 stay? They are only halfway through their primary education. If they leave now, it would be equivalent to giving up halfway. Pfft, Tilly could not help but laugh. It seems that you like them very much. For a moment, he did not know how to respond to this sentence. I want to ask, how do you use Candle and Evelyn's abilities? Solidifying metal parts and making wine. The former can greatly improve the efficiency of mechanical operation, while the latter. Roland paused for a moment. Wine is a very good thing. In addition to drinking, it has many other uses. But on Sleeping Island, they are always worried that their abilities are useless, and often. Tilly did not continue, but Roland guessed that it should be related to discrimination, just like what Mystery Moon had experienced in the Witch Cooperation Association. I am very happy to hear that you want them to stay. Sure enough, every witch has a unique role, and their abilities are not meaningless. She looked at Evelyn and the others. What do you think? I want to follow you, Lady Tilly. Sylvie said. Candle touched her head. Anywhere is fine. Lady Tilly, if you need me, I will return to Sleeping Island. Evelyn was silent for a moment before replying. Apart from that, I want to continue to stay in Border Town. I still have many things I want to learn from Teacher Scroll. Don't be so nervous. I'm not asking you to choose whether you want to stay or leave. This is not a matter of choosing between two. Tilly smiled and shook her head. I just want to understand the situation of your life in Border Town. You can return to Sleeping Island at any time. Lotus and Honey will also come back. I even want to invite the witches of Border Town to visit Sleeping Island. I hope that through our efforts, in the future, whether it is in the Northern or Southern Territory, witches can live freely. Do you think I'm right? Brother. Roland was slightly startled. This was the first time he had heard her call him that in public. Even with the fourth prince's memory, it was still more than 10 years ago. He smiled and nodded. There will be such a day. Chapter 330. Genius 1 second. Remember, if you want to go. TalkNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. After talking about this matter, Roland cleared his throat and said in a serious tone, "Next is the news about the devils and the ruins." He told Tilly about Border Town's recent discoveries behind the snowy mountains and in the concealing forest. I originally planned to send witches and the soldiers of the First Army to bring the people trapped in the ruins back to Border Town, but the heavy snow that came more than a month early disrupted the plan. The legendary Devil Army is actually so close, and there are still people living in the ruins from more than 400 years ago. Tilly was stunned. "I'm starting to believe what you told me." Anna tilted her head and looked at Roland, who coughed twice. According to the scene observed and the reaction of the other side, the devils should have been entrenched behind the snowy mountains for many years. I guess they are limited by the scope of the red mist and cannot continue to expand to the mainland of the kingdom, so for the time being they will not pose a threat to Border Town. In the next 2 years, I will establish coastal guard points to monitor their movements. He paused, but the sealed person in the ruins, she is likely to know the truth about the holy city of Tequila and the church's defeat. I also think so. Tilly closed her eyes and thought for a moment. Is there a way to go directly by air instead of by land? Ashes said that you have a tool that can carry people when it is filled with hot air. You want to take her out of the ruins on the day of the months of demons? Roland frowned. The Cloud Gazer hot air balloon can carry 10 people, or make it a little bigger, expanding the number of people to 15, but no matter what, it is impossible to take the soldiers of the First Army. If we encounter the devils, the witches may encounter casualties, plus the omnipresent demonic beasts. It is too dangerous. If we only rely on the Witch Cooperation Association, it is indeed very dangerous. Tilly nodded. But now we have Shavy and Ashes, the degree of danger has been reduced a lot. Love go little say Neku. According to what you said before, the devil's main attack method is long-range spear throwing, and their strength is far beyond that of ordinary people in close combat. In this aspect, Shavy's invisible barrier could block several spears, and Ashes could suppress the enemy in close combat. Now that the months of the demons have just arrived, the strength of the demonic beasts is not strong. If you want to go to the ruins, now is the best time. Roland was a little hesitant. The last time he fought with the demons, he was at a disadvantage in aerial combat. The thought of flying over again made him feel uneasy. However, what Tilly said was also reasonable. Sylvie's magic eyes could ensure that the enemy would discover them first. As long as the hot air balloon maintained a height of 10 to 15 meters, which was to fly close to the treetops, it was completely certain that it would land before the enemy approached. Next, with Nightingale and Ashes' powerful attacks, the small team of 10 or so demons was completely annihilated. Even if there were any survivors, Shavy and Anna's double shields would ensure the safety of the team. He pondered for a moment. "Are you sure you want to go?" "I think this may be an opportunity to solve the mystery," Tilly said frankly. This year's months of demons came early, and the demonic beasts appeared in the South Sea. I always have a bad feeling. Roland's heart slightly shivered. He also had this feeling. The months of demons was unlikely to be an abnormal phenomenon caused by climate change. He faintly felt that this was inseparable from the devils and the church. What about the team? "I don't know much about the witches in Border Town, but I will personally go here," Tilly said without hesitation. Snowflakes fluttered in the gray sky. Maine and Tayfun slowly climbed the walls of Hermes, which had just experienced a battle. Warm black blood flowed under their feet, melting the white snow into a viscous blood. Fortunately, this blood was flowing from the enemy's body. Hundreds of God's Punishment Army soldiers were standing upright on the walls, waiting for the demonic beasts to launch the next wave of attack. "Your Excellency," The warriors of the Judgment Army, who assisted the gods' punishment army, clenched their fists and saluted. Most of them looked a little immature, with a mixture of fear and excitement in their eyes. They are still children, Taifun sighed as they walked to an open space, looked at the wilderness, and said, when I was their age, I was still grinding flour for the nobles in the mill. The gods' punishment army must prioritize the defense of the new holy city, so I can only hand over the stubbornly resisting remnants of Wolfshart City to the experienced army of judges to clean up. Moreover, these people are just recently promoted believers, so before this, they have never really been on the battlefield, Maine said helplessly. This snow came too early. Taifun hesitated, the Holy Book didn't record such a situation. The Holy Book was also written by the Pope, so it's inevitable that there are omissions. The bishop leaned on the cold battlement, overlooking the cliff full of corpses. Ordinary demonic beasts couldn't climb such a high wall, and only hybrid beasts could threaten the holy city. As long as the general direction it pointed out is correct, it's fine. From the appearance of the wild beasts last year, we can infer that we have about 10 years left. 2 years to unify the 4 kingdoms, and 8 years to build the gods' punishment army. At that time, the church will have a huge army of more than 10,000 people. He continued, using the strong city wall and terrain of Hermes, we will stick to this plateau until the enemy's strength is reversed. I'm old, I'm afraid I won't be able to see that time. It has nothing to do with age, Lord Taifun, Maine comforted. Too many people won't be able to see that moment, like Alan, Stone, Lizzie, and Heather, Taifun added. Yes, and Heather. He nodded. But no matter what, there will be people who will inherit our mission and continue on. Don't say such discouraging words. The old man shook his head and smiled. By the way, how is the snow powder Formula Zero got? Has it been tested in the pivotal secret area? It's used to deal with mortals, it won't be of much help to the church, Maine said disdainfully. Snow powder may be used to clean up groups of demonic beasts, but our real enemy is the abyss devils. Its lethality in open areas is greatly reduced, and if we want to make it powerful enough to injure the heavily armored devils, we must make it very large. Except for the gods' punishment army, no one can throw a bag of snow powder half the size of a human body. Is that so? What a pity. If we want to defeat the devils, there is no chance of using any tricks, Maine said word by word. Only by defeating them head-on can we survive. At this moment, a long horn sounded from the watchtower on the side of the city wall. Woo! A long horn meant that the demonic beasts were coming. Let's go back to the cathedral, there will be another battle here. Yes. Taifun nodded, and had just turned away when the horn sounded again. Woo! Woo! 2 long horns meant that there were many mixed demonic beasts among the demonic beasts. Maine's heart trembled. There was no doubt that the gods' punishment army would face a tough battle. But, why is it so fast? This is only the first month of the months of demons. However, before the echo of the horn ended, the third horn sounded. The dull and continuous sound was like thunder, rolling over the sky of Hermes and did not subside for a long time. Woo, 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 Maine could hardly believe his ears. He looked at Taifun, who was also looking at him in shock. The 3 horns meant that the situation was extremely urgent, and the new holy city was in danger. Even last time when the demonic beasts broke into the periphery of the cathedral, there was no such horn sound. What did the watchtower see? Maine soon found the answer. Among the demonic beasts, there were 2 extremely large monsters. They had 4 thick fangs, 4 feet and 2 hands, and were covered in pitch-black fur. One of their feet was as thick as the torso of a mixed demonic beast. From afar, the giant beasts looked like a moving fortress. Each step they took left a deep mark on the permafrost-covered plain. If the demonic beasts around them did not retreat in time, they would also be trampled into a pool of flesh and blood. There were many records of them in the Holy Book, such as the Announcer of the Dead, the Fearful Beast of Hell, the Fangs of the Devil. But what scared Maine was not their terrible appearance, but the meaning they represented. Chapter 331. The next day, Roland said goodbye to Lotus and Honey in the castle's back garden. Although he didn't want them to leave so soon, but after hearing that the charming beauty was still waiting at the shoal, he decided not to delay it any longer. This way, at least he could show his generosity, and also wouldn't make things difficult for Tilly. Putting himself in their shoes, the other side was able to send the important witches to Border Town before the large-scale construction of Sleeping Island, which was already a show of sincerity. That being the case, he wouldn't be too demanding. In order to avoid a long trek in the snow, Anna and Vendi sent them to board the ship. If they used the cloud gazer to transport them, it would only take them half an hour to reach the shoal. "Thank you for taking care of us these past few months," the two bowed in front of Roland. "I should be the one thanking you," Roland smiled. "You have made a lot of contributions to the construction of Border Town, so I have 2 gifts to give you." Gift? Lotus was slightly surprised, her cheeks showing a touch of crimson. Honey touched her own chest, glanced at Lotus's, and excitedly asked, "Can we also have them?" Roland took the 2 bags from Nightingale's hands and gave them to her. "Yes, both of them." Honey couldn't wait to open the bag, and from inside pulled out a long white cloth. "Hey, what is this? Isn't this a bra?" "Ahem, this is a scarf." He stepped forward and picked up the pure cotton cloth, wrapping it around her neck. "This way, you won't have to worry about the cold wind and snowflakes pouring into your neck. If you wrap it a little thicker, you can also cover your ears." "Oh, so warm," the latter exclaimed with a satisfied face. Roland didn't know if it was an illusion, but Lotus's face became even redder. "There is something else inside." Honey played with the scarf for a while, and then took out a small square from the bag. "Your Highness, is this also a gift?" "Yes, open it and see." "Wow, it's so bright." She raised the iron box and said excitedly, "Lotus, look, you can clearly see your own appearance." It was a small mirror embedded in a wooden box. It was also one of the products put into the convenience market. In Roland's life experience, as long as one was a woman, they would not be able to resist this kind of shiny thing. Honey's voice attracted the attention of the other witches. Soon, the witches of Sleeping Island gathered together and looked at themselves in the mirror, unable to suppress their love and envy. After all, this kind of crystal mirror made of Soroya's film was far more reflective, and the overall image was much better than the silver mirror, which also let Roland see a new way to bribe them. After the gifts were delivered, the hot air balloon was also inflated. The 2 of them boarded the basket and waved goodbye to Roland and the other witches. It was obvious that they were reluctant to leave the town. "I have to say, this is indeed a good place." Tilly walked to his side and whispered, "Convenient water supply, comfortable rooms. It's hard to believe that you transformed a barren place into what it is today in just a year. Do you regret it?" "You mean sending witches to the town?" She laughed. "How could I regret it? If I can make their lives better, how could I regret it? Don't forget, I'm also a witch." In the white garden, Tilly's smile was like clean snowflakes, beautiful without a trace of color. If there was such a sister in the future, the rate of people turning their heads would definitely be 100%. But in Roland's heart, it was clear that compared to her identity as a sister, her relationship with him was more like that of a collaborator, a natural ally. From her decision yesterday, it could be seen that in order to deal with possible threats, she even dared to go to dangerous places. "Do you really want to go to such a dangerous place?" Roland asked. "Although you are an extraordinary witch, your ability is not suitable for fighting, right? Rest assured, I am not completely without the ability to protect myself." Tilly stretched out her hands and showed the prince the jewelry in her hands. He saw that on the ring finger of her left hand was a blue crystal ring, and on her right hand was a white silk glove, the back of which was inlaid with a red gem. To be honest, this kind of combination looked particularly strange. The asymmetrical dress style was simply like the popular mix and match style on the runway in the future. He was very curious about this yesterday, but out of politeness he didn't ask. "This is a magic stone, a strange stone found in ancient ruins," she explained. "After pouring magic into it, it can display different abilities. For example, this ring can let me fly freely like lightning. After saying this, as if to prove what she said, her feet slowly left the ground, and her body floated in the air as if it was weightless. This scene startled Roland. Her ability could actually be changed through a stone. He quickly realized the great significance contained in this. If it was possible to order abilities in batches, the witch's work efficiency would be greatly improved. Take Lotus, for example. If the Witch Union could have a magic stone that imitated Lotus ability, it would only take 1 day to complete the construction of the temporary residential area. After Tilly landed, she pointed her right hand to an open space, only to see a bright lightning burst out from her fingertips, and a bowl-sized hole appeared in the ankle-deep snow, revealing the dark ground below. So you can have 2 abilities at the same time? Roland asked in surprise. No, Tilly shook her head. The magic stone can only allow 1 ability to appear within a certain range. If I pour magic into both stones at the same time, then nothing will happen. She then smiled. I didn't intend to reveal this information to you so soon, but after the meeting last night, I think I might have misunderstood you. I'm very happy that you're willing to tell me about the ancient ruins, and I'm a little sorry. It doesn't matter, I can understand. By the way, I have some concerns. What was the bra that Honey was talking about? Roland almost choked on his saliva. Ahem, I don't know, maybe you can ask Sylvie or Evelyn. Well, Tilly shrugged, it seems that you still have some reservations about me. The prince didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Let's not talk about this, she blinked and said, I have been thinking about a question last night. If these ruins belong to the church, why did they abandon all the magic stones? According to Ashes's experience, the church is likely to keep witches, and these things have the same important use for them. Even if they fled after the battle with the devils, and deliberately buried the results of the war, it doesn't prevent them from continuing to use these stones. It doesn't make any sense. The church doesn't care about this loss. Roland pondered, but he quickly rejected his own opinion. No, they shouldn't be able to mass-produce this kind of magic stone, otherwise they would have already used it to hunt down the Fugitive Witch Cooperation Association. After all, if they could fly, most people wouldn't be able to escape the church's witches. Indeed, I recalled all the books about the church and the gods in the palace library, and found something very strange. Their historical records not only stopped at more than 400 years ago, even the origin of the gods is vague. There are no illustrious names, no epic legends. In addition to the propaganda that they are omnipotent, omniscient, there are no more details to speak of. At least, compared to the 3 ancient gods, they appear to be much more illusory. Combining the 2 together, people can't help but have a strange feeling. What? Roland's heart shivered. The church seems to have suddenly appeared. To be continued. Chapter 332. Genius 1 second to remember love yo go. TalkNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. The church seems to have suddenly appeared. Even after returning to the office, Roland's heart was still echoing these words. He closed his eyes and carefully searched through Prince Roland's memory, but still couldn't find any more relevant content. His understanding of the church was similar to that of an ordinary noble. In the palace, Prince Roland didn't spend much effort on learning knowledge, and his knowledge of occultism was almost a blank. But if what Tilly said was true, then the church's propaganda strategy was too strange. Taking the religious legends of the original world as an example, the idea that God originated from the beginning of the world was child's play, and the idea that the world was created by God was the one that everyone unanimously chose. For example, the creation of the world in 7 days, the reincarnation of karma, and so on. A complete set of legends describing the power of God was the standard for every religion. In comparison, the church of this world seemed quite immature. However, Roland didn't have any more clues to continue his research, so he shook his head and decided to put these thoughts to the back of his mind. Perhaps after exploring the ancient ruins of the concealing forest, he would have all the answers. He went to the window and looked at the huge coating that was spread out on the ground in the garden. In the vast expanse of white snow, its green appearance was particularly striking. Now Soroya was gluing a larger air sac, and the new hot air balloon would be even larger and could carry more people. This was in consideration of the fact that if they couldn't find a way to rescue the trapped woman during the exploration of the ruins, they would simply let Anna cut the whole ice coffin and bring her back to Border Town along with a part of the transparent crystal. The departure time was set for 2 days later. The personnel had already been arranged. The sleeping island witches were Tilly, Sylvie, Shavi, Ashes, and Andrea. The witch union would send Anna, Vendi, Nightingale, Nana, Lightning, and Maggie. This time's lineup could be said to be unprecedentedly strong, with the highest level of attack, defense, and battlefield awareness. As long as they didn't use God's Stone of Retaliation, it would be difficult for the devils to get close to them. "Your Highness, Chief Alchemist Sir Kemchester wants to see you," a guard said outside the door. "Let him in." This time, Kyle didn't come alone, he also brought his colleague Chavez with him. "Your Highness, we already have some progress on the large-scale production of nitric acid that you requested." "Really?" Roland was slightly startled, and then a burst of joy surged in his heart. This was probably the best news he had heard in recent days. He stood up excitedly and personally poured a cup of tea for the two chemists. "Tell me, how did you make it?" "This is the credit of Chavez," he said, stroking his beard and smiling. "Let him explain it to you." "Your Royal Highness," the young Chavez appeared to be somewhat reserved, he bowed and said, "Your alchemy workshop." "No, the chemical laboratory produces nitric acid by dry distillation of saltpeter to obtain dilute nitric acid and then purify it with concentrated sulfuric acid. So I tried to combine the two together and directly put the saltpeter in concentrated sulfuric acid to heat it. As a result, I succeeded in obtaining a nitric acid solution. Moreover, the purity was very high. I could even observe the smoking phenomenon recorded in elementary chemistry. Shared heat. But the two are not the same thing, Roland said, feeling strange. The temperature of dry distillation is much higher than that of shared heat. Moreover, the gas produced by dry distillation should be nitrogen oxide, and when introduced into water, it will form dilute nitric acid. The purification of concentrated sulfuric acid is only using the principle of its high boiling point and strong water absorption to reduce the water content of nitric acid. It does not involve a chemical reaction. I don't really understand why, but Mr. Sichi later did a few experiments and thought that my discovery was a coincidence. A coincidence? Roland looked at the chief alchemist. Indeed, Kyle affirmed, the two are not the same, but they produce the same effect. According to the chemical formula, I deduced that it should be some component of the saltpeter and sulfuric acid that produced nitric acid, which then evaporated in the heat. According to the formula, it looks like some kind of, well, nitrate. Roland's mind suddenly remembered that in the chemistry textbook, it was indeed mentioned that before the invention of synthetic ammonia, people used sodium nitrate or potassium nitrate to react with concentrated sulfuric acid to produce nitric acid. This was also the oldest industrial method. Because the main components of saltpeter were two kinds of nitrates, it was easy to obtain and extract. As long as the temperature was controlled, a steady stream of evaporated nitric acid could be collected. Of course, because this method consumed a large amount of sulfuric acid, it was also extremely easy to corrode the equipment. Later on, it was quickly eliminated by more advanced technology. However, these 2 points were not too big of a problem for Roland. His territory had not yet established a supporting fertilizer and pesticide industry, so the sulfuric acid produced was only used to purify nitric acid. As for the strong corrosiveness of the nitric acid steam, he could rely on Soroya's coating to solve it. Well done, Roland happily patted Chavez's shoulder, you actually managed to come up with this method by chance. You may not know this, but when he was in the Redwater City Alchemy Workshop, he had already shown extraordinary luck. Kyle Mosqui raised his eyebrows. Before learning chemistry, alchemy itself is a kind of exploration that requires luck. But this kid was able to discover the double acid production method in his early 20s, and became the youngest alchemist in the workshop, causing a group of 30 or 40-year-old apprentices to be so envious that their eyes turned red. You have to know that for the rest of their lives, it is very likely that they will only be apprentices. In any case, This is good news for Border Town, Roland praised. You can first try to produce a batch of equipment. I will let the witches cooperate with you. If it is feasible, then we can expand the production scale. As you wish. That's right, I still have another task for you. Roland then put away his happy mood and said in a solemn tone, now that we have a reliable source of nitric acid, I need you to try to produce a very dangerous item, nitroglycerin. How dangerous is it? Kyle asked. The raw material used is very simple, that is, a reaction between concentrated nitric acid and glycerin, supplemented by concentrated sulfuric acid as a catalyst, but during the reaction process you must strictly control the temperature and maintain ventilation. Because nitrification will produce a lot of heat, you can put the container in ice water to test. Remember, sudden changes in temperature, vibration, impact, and friction can all lead to an explosion. Roland didn't know whether this amateur knowledge was reliable or not, but there was no doubt that the composition was correct. Even if it was dangerous, he still had to try. During the test, use a small amount of acid, so that even if an accident occurs, Miss Nana will be able to rescue you. This. Chavez opened his mouth, but before he had the time to answer, Kyle had already agreed. I understand. How does its power compare to snow powder? The difference is like heaven and earth. It seems that it will be an interesting experiment, the chief alchemist said with a smile. 9 out of 10 chemists are potential explosion art lovers. This is really true. Roland thought. Nitroglycerin was extremely unstable. Nobel's safety explosives were made by adding diatomaceous earth to passivate the ester, which improved the safety, but reduced the explosive power. Roland naturally wouldn't choose this classical method. He intended to add nitrocellulose or nitrostarch to the nitroglycerin, both of which could play a stabilizing role, but could also further enhance the explosive effect. The former was an excellent smokeless propellant, while the latter was a powerful explosive. From their names, it could be seen that a large amount of nitric acid was the key to the evolution of black powder into chemical gunpowder. And now he already had this key. Chapter 333. A genius in a second to remember if you like it. The web provides you with wonderful novels to read. Before setting out to explore the ruins, Tilly's greatest interest was to wander slowly along the flat streets of Border Town and observe this remote territory that had undergone amazing changes in the hands of Lord Roland. This is a different town, she thought. The more she observed, the stronger this feeling became. It was completely different from any place she had ever been. What left the deepest impression on her was probably the unparalleled vitality of this small town. Even the new sleeping island couldn't compare to it. Aren't these people afraid of freezing? Looking at the pedestrians coming and going on the street, Andrea asked curiously, what did your brother promise them to make them willing to work in winter? It's still mid-autumn. Ashes spread out her hands. Don't tell me you can't even tell the seasons. But it's no different from winter. This is an analogy that often appears in Her Dream, His Kingdom. Andrea elegantly flipped her long hair. Of course, the barbarians won't understand. What do you mean by your dream, my dream? See, vulgar people who have never appreciated a play are really difficult to communicate with. Lady Tilly must have watched this famous play from the Kingdom of Dawn. Stop arguing, Sylvie sighed. I think the reason is probably very simple. Commoners are reluctant to move around in winter because they consume a lot of energy, don't have enough to eat, and are prone to catching a cold. But these problems don't exist in this town. The price of food here is not high, and there is plenty of firewood. Moreover, Miss Lily can cure colds, so they work hard in the cold wind and snow. 1 more day of work means 1 more day of pay. I can understand that there is plenty of firewood. The misty forest is to the west, and there are many woods around it, so the price of food is not high. How is this possible? Andrea was puzzled. My family has also been involved in selling food. For example, when there is a decrease in harvest caused by natural disasters, everyone will raise the price of food very high. In such bad weather, it's impossible for the nobles and merchants not to sell at a high price, right? Nobles? Merchants? Sylvie laughed involuntarily and said, only one person is allowed to buy and sell food here, and that is His Highness Roland. The farmland by the river is all his property? Tilly frowned. No, those are the serf's own fields. She recounted what she had seen and heard here, as well as the scene of the harvest. He set two prices for food, one is the purchase price, the other is the sale price. These two prices are fixed, the latter is higher than the former. Isn't this a forced purchase? Ashes had an unsurprised expression on her face. If he can sell it at a high price, why can't others sell it at a high price? It's not the same, Tilly muttered. After the wheat is harvested, it needs to be threshed, ground, and stored in the warehouse. These are all costs, so it's normal for the price to rise. What Lady Tilly said is right. I later asked Teacher Scroll and understood, Sylvie said with a smile. She said that after the extra cost is collected, it can be used as salary for the employees who process the wheat, to build a new granary, to expand the production scale. All of these can provide the town with new. She thought for a moment. Jobs, yes, that's what she said at the time. I heard that His Highness Roland is very concerned about this. But he is still forced to buy and sell, Ashes emphasized. Shouldn't trade be free? Maybe, but the selling price set by His Highness is not so high that everyone can't afford it. If this price can be kept fixed, the people will feel more at ease. Sometimes freedom isn't the best, Tilly said with emotion. She had roughly understood the intention of Roland's approach. Prohibiting others from selling food in the territory seemed overbearing and unfair, but in fact, it put an end to hoarding and could effectively prevent the price of food from skyrocketing when there was a shortage. If it was in King's City, the price of food would inevitably rise by more than 5 or 6 times as much as usual, and more than half of the civilians would starve because of the lack of food. Over a long period of time, it was easy to cause riots, and eventually the palace would have to issue relief rations or dispatch guards to suppress it. In either case, it would be a big burden on the national treasury. Although this policy seemed good, it wouldn't work everywhere. Most of the people who controlled the food trade were nobles and wealthy merchants. They had a large number of serfs and fields, so it was impossible for the royal family to forcibly purchase the food they produced and forbid them from hoarding food. However, in Border Town, besides Roland Wimbledon himself, there were almost no aristocratic families, so it was completely up to him. After Tilly expressed her opinion, Ashes was still somewhat indignant. What about those serfs? When the price of food is high, they may be able to get more income, but in this way, they will be exploited by the fixed price. Pfft, Andrea sneered, you're talking as if in a free trade city, these people can escape exploitation. When the wheat harvest is good, not only will they have to hand in more wheat, but even the price of their own will be pushed down to a very low level. When the harvest is bad, after deducting the part that has to be handed in, whether the remaining amount can survive the famine is still a problem. In contrast, a fixed price is more reasonable. As long as the crops are produced, the more income. Here, they can choose not to do it. Sylvie's words made the three slightly startled. His Royal Highness said that when the yield reaches a certain standard, the serfs can be promoted to free people. Whether they continue to work in the fields or choose a new job, it's all up to them. However, free people only have to hand in 20% of the food. According to the purchase price of this year's harvest, the salary is also very considerable. Promoted. Yes, when His Royal Highness preached, he also said that within 2 or 3 years, Border Town will no longer have a single serf. So that's how it is. Tilly's heart was suddenly touched by something. This is the reason why the town is full of vitality. When he formulates policies, he unexpectedly takes into account the people's thoughts, and also adds an incentive system to encourage them to do more and better. This is completely different from any other noble lord's approach. Incentives are not only expressed in words, but also in reality to give away part of the benefits, so that the people can obtain them through hard work, instead of hiding these benefits deep in the castle's underground vault. At this time, she really understood the meaning of those red banners on the riverside. However, when Roland Wimbledon was in the palace, he wasn't a generous person. So, this is also a change brought about by the sudden memory. Also, the evening lectures on elementary nature and mathematics, all of which made her feel very fascinated. Tilly originally thought that after reading all the books in the palace collection, it would be difficult to find anything that could arouse her curiosity and interest, but now, she found that she still had a lot to learn. Suddenly, a feeling welled up in her heart. Even if she did nothing, just stayed in the town's castle, flipping through the books that recorded the magical knowledge, and watching the changes in the town at the same time, it would also be a pleasant thing. Suddenly, a long bell rang from the direction of the city wall, which was the alarm of the demonic beast's attack. Tilly suppressed these thoughts to the bottom of her heart. Unfortunately, now she was no longer the free and unfettered fifth princess, but a leader who shouldered the fate of the witches of Sleeping Island. There were some things that she couldn't just do as she pleased. She said, "Let's go to the city wall to have a look, maybe we can help the guards." Of course, Andrea smiled slightly, "This is why we came here. Let them have a good look at how witches fight." Chapter 334. When the bell rang, the whole camp seemed to be boiling up. Vanna rushed out of the tent and followed the crowd to the top of the wall, entering his combat position. This process had already been practiced countless times. Even if there was no one to command them, everyone knew what they had to do next. Just like last year during the months of demons, in a state of alert, only a small number of patrols were arranged on each section of the wall. Scattered demonic beasts could be dealt with by 2 or 3 people. If the lookouts saw a large-scale attack of demonic beasts, they would sound the alarm. On the horizon, a dark shadow was approaching. Vanna roughly estimated the number of enemies, which was about 1,000 or so. If it was 1 year ago, it would definitely be a difficult battle. As a long gunner who was responsible for buying time for the Flintlock team, he had to alternate with the reserve members in order to persist until the end. But now, the strength of the town had undergone earth-shaking changes. Cat's Claw opened the cover of the cannon and shook off the snow. Rodney checked the field artillery barrel, confirmed that there was no foreign object inside, and then began to load the ammunition. Although the current wall had been changed to be made of mud, its height and width had increased. Moreover, there was an artillery platform every 100 meters, which greatly improved the defensive firepower. The aisle was wide enough for 4 people to pass side by side. During the battle, the first row was for the Flintlock team, and the second row was for the recruit loaders. The latter was responsible for loading the bullets into the cartridge and then handing them to the official soldiers in front. "Don't they find it annoying?" Rodney yawned. Every year during the months of demons, they would come here crazily. Even if they attacked the town, it wouldn't do them any good, would it? "It's just right for us to practice," Narson laughed. Compared to a fixed wooden target, the demonic beasts are more interesting to shoot. Speaking of target practice, I recently heard an interesting rumor related to our artillery team, Job said with a mysterious face. "What rumor?" "I heard from other artillery teams that people who can shoot accurately will be incorporated into an elite artillery team and take on a new task." He paused. "Do any of you know more inside information?" "Elite artillery team. Even you, who claims to be knowledgeable, don't know. How can we know more?" "Maybe someone was bored and made it up." Vanner was the only one in the gunner group who didn't say anything. After hearing Job's words, he couldn't help but frown. Someone actually bragged about this matter. A week ago, Lord Iron Axe had visited him and told him that His Royal Highness planned to develop a new type of artillery, which was completely different from the field artillery currently used. It would not be given to the First Army to use, but would be installed on the ships, making them capable of long-range attacks. The new cannon would be operated by the best member of the artillery team. If you wanted to join, you could apply to Iron Axe. Of course, Vanner agreed without hesitation. This was obviously an opportunity for him to advance further in the army. According to Iron Axe, His Royal Highness had high expectations for this new army, and it was even possible for it to separate from the First Army and become a brand new army. If one could make a great contribution, the newly built warships would be named after the person with the most outstanding contribution. What kind of glory was that? If there was a warship named Van, he would be satisfied for the rest of his life. Thinking back to when he was just a handyman in the mining area, he always boasted that he was extraordinary, but in the end, he couldn't even save his brother's life in the slums of the stronghold. But now, he didn't need to boast that the army didn't need to worry about food and drink, and that his uniform was thick and warm. Even if he returned to the neighborhood, his neighbors would know his name. All these changes were brought about by His Royal Highness. Thinking back to the time when he joined the militia for an egg, it was simply the wisest choice in his life. In addition, Iron Axe also asked him if he had any suitable candidates to recommend, so that he could also apply for them. In other words, these young boys might get the opportunity to stand out, but they were too jumpy, and it was better to wait until they were a bit more mature. And if they made a great contribution, would those warships also be called Jop or Cat's Claw? That's just too awful. Rodney and Nelson could still be considered. As for the fact that some people couldn't help but leak this information to their subordinates, they had to report to Iron Axe. After all, it was very clear in the regulations class that any information about the First Army, unless there was a clear request from the higher-ups, could not be spread without authorization. Don't shout, now all of you should focus on the battlefield, Vanner coughed twice, interrupting the discussion of the members of the artillery team. Don't forget, Sir Iron Axe repeatedly stressed in class, any mistake may lead to an irreversible failure. Yes. Everyone said in unison. Because the killing efficiency of solid iron balls was too low, when dealing with groups of demonic beasts, they would wait until the other side was close enough to shoot with grape-shot bullets. When the ferocious-looking wolves took the lead to cross the 100-meter line, the bombardment began. The heat wave rolled up the snow under the muzzle, and the loud roar made Vanner's ears hurt. In the distance, black blood suddenly rose, and the demonic beasts suddenly fell. Whether it was the wild boar or the bear, their fur was not enough to withstand the close-range bombardment of iron balls. "There's a big guy over there," Cat pointed to the left, a red-skinned wolf. A group of people quickly moved the artillery carriage, adjusted the muzzle to the target direction, and reloaded. In theory, there was no need to aim the grape-shot bullets. As long as they fired in front of them, they would be able to sweep down a large number of enemies. Moreover, the newly built mud wall was higher than the stone wall, and the wolves could not threaten the top of the wall. The priority to attack the flexible demonic beasts was only for the purpose of target practice. Next, it was finally the turn of the long-restrained flintlock team. In order to ensure a hit rate, they always waited until they were within 50 meters before shooting. The sound of the revolving rifle was not as uniform as that of the flintlock, but was dense and continuous. White smoke floated up from the top of the wall, and the choking smell of gunpowder made him sneeze. "These idiots, their power is obviously very small, but when they shoot, the smoke is more than anyone else," Job complained. "But in the end, the battle is still decided by the artillery," Rodney agreed. "It was the same when dealing with the knight, and it should be the same when dealing with the demonic beasts." At this moment, a rapid bell sound came from the direction of the lookout post, which was an early warning of the discovery of hybrid demonic beasts. Vanner squinted his eyes and looked forward, only to see two huge black shadows slowly moving forward in the smoke. Judging from their size, they should be siege beasts with heavy shells. "What did I just say?" Vanner grinned. "Now it's time for us to show off, change to the pointed solid bullets." In order to deal with enemies with high defense, the munitions factory had developed a new type of shell that could penetrate the enemy's shell at a distance of about 200 meters. If the previous attack on the wolf-type demonic beasts was a warm-up, then this was the official shooting. "Do a good job," Vanner clapped his hands and said, "Let the other artillery team see who is the most elite artillery soldier." Chapter 335. As soon as Andrea reached a corner of the city wall, she was shocked by what she saw. She saw a row of soldiers dressed as militia standing on the wall, holding a strange weapon in their hands, which was probably the flintlock ashes mentioned. As the demonic beasts approached, the flintlock spewed flames and smoke, and the sound of continuous explosions echoed in her ears. It should be a weapon similar to a crossbow, but she could not see the bolts they shot at all, probably because of the smoke and dust. The demonic beasts at the forefront seemed to be hit by something, and their bodies trembled and fell to the ground one after another. But the soldiers neither observed the results of the battle nor loaded the bolts, but continued to shoot at the enemy, and their speed was several times faster than if they were to draw the bow themselves. "Is this the terrible weapon you mentioned?" Andrea felt her lips were a little dry. The shooting speed is indeed fast, but the hit rate seems to be. These people were miners, farmers, and hunters before they were recruited into the First Army, Ashes interrupted. They used this weapon for less than half a year. It took 5 years to train a well-trained soldier, and even longer for an archer. Even the shortest training time for a crossbow was about half a year, so that the farmers would not panic and release the bolts. As for actual combat, only God knew what they could hit. Most of the time, they just carried them around to boost their momentum. Andrea could not help but swallow. She was no stranger to this kind of training. Her family had also trained an outstanding knight, so she naturally understood what it meant to be able to put them into actual combat in about half a year. As long as there was an adequate supply of weapons and food, Roland would be able to assemble a large army in a short period of time. Furthermore, this army would not have to worry about being defeated in close combat. Even elite knights would have a hard time getting close to them if they attacked continuously. This had nothing to do with the courage and willpower of the militia, it was the weapons that gave them great strength. "Do you know anything else about flintlocks?" Tilly pondered for a moment and asked Sylvie. The latter nodded. "I've carefully observed it many times, and it is indeed a weapon similar to a crossbow. The arrowhead is very short, and it has no shaft or tail feathers. The difference is that the arrowhead doesn't rely on the elasticity of the string, but on the impact of the explosion of the black powder, which can instantly raise the arrowhead to an extremely high speed." "Black powder?" Ashes asked, "What is that?" "It's probably some kind of alchemy product." She shook her head. "I don't know the specific ingredients." "It must be very expensive," Andrea said. "Alchemists never make anything cheap." Ashes pursed her lips. "Is that so?" "But judging from the way they're shooting, it doesn't seem like they're using anything expensive." "Wait, something's coming." Sylvie, who was observing the battlefield, was slightly startled. "Oh my God, is this also a demonic beast?" It was almost as tall as the city wall. "It looks like a giant turtle with a huge shell on its back." Andrea immediately perked up. "Carapace?" "The effectiveness of these guns would probably be limited. As long as I could get within 10 steps of them, even the city walls wouldn't be able to block my magic arrows." "Ashes, you cover me." "Phew, okay." Ashes reluctantly took the big sword from her back. "But first, don't lose Lady Tilly's face." "Don't go," Sylvie stopped them. "They still have." Andrea didn't hear the second half of the other party's words. She only heard a deafening roar, like thunder exploding in her ears. She turned around and saw that the metal tubes on the city wall were spewing flames at the same time. This time, she could vaguely see the trajectory of the arrowheads. They were like shadows, flying towards the monster that had just appeared in the distance at the speed of lightning. After a few breaths, several snow pillars rose around the monster. After the flying snowflakes fell, the ugly giant demonic beast still moved at a fixed speed. Obviously, this attack didn't hit the opponent. But even so, it was enough to surprise Andrea. This distance was far beyond the range of longbows and crossbows. "This is, His Royal Highness calls it a field artillery, in simple terms, it's an enlarged flintlock," Sylvie said as she loosened her hands from covering her ears. "Its power is much greater than a flintlock, and its range is also much longer. He used this to easily defeat Timothy's militia fleet at the Redwater River's fork." The demonic beast's luck did not continue. 2 of the second round of bombardment accurately hit its carapace. Andrea could see it very clearly. The uneven carapace gave off a thin layer of mist with a dull thud. The side of the carapace near its head was directly blasted open. Black blood and internal organs spurted out from the holes, splattering everywhere. The battle didn't take long to end. In front of the city wall, there were many corpses of demonic beasts. The flowing blood made a white mist float above the snow. The soldiers began to clean up the aftermath, but she still couldn't find an opportunity to attack. It seems that I was wrong. Tilly smiled helplessly. He doesn't need the help of a combat witch. The last time I came to Border Town, this kind of weapon wasn't popular yet. Only the chief knight could have it. Now he has actually made so many. Ashes sighed. Perhaps this is the reason why His Highness dared to insist on publicizing the existence of witches under the heavy pressure of the church. Andrea didn't answer. If it was in normal times, she would have ridiculed Ashes. But now she only felt extremely depressed and didn't even have the strength to argue. Back in the castle, His Highness Roland still prepared a sumptuous lunch for the witches. Seeing the colorful dishes on the table, Andrea felt even more suffocated. The upper nobles of the Kingdom of Dawn paid attention to the beauty of nature when it came to food. They were willing to spend a lot of golden dragon and energy to buy some rare and precious ingredients, and then cook them in the most authentic way. In her eyes, food like Greycastle, which was sprinkled with all kinds of spices and sauces, was a very vulgar way to eat. Seasonings were only used to cover up the food's own defects. The more seasonings were added, the worse the taste. But, every dish on the table was terrifyingly delicious. For example, charcoal grilled mushrooms. Where did His Highness find such plump and juicy mushrooms? With a little bite, the overflowing juice could almost fill her mouth. And this vegetable soup, which looked very ordinary and clear, had a strong fragrance when she drank it, as if it was cooked with whole chicken, ribs, and kelp. The most special dessert was ice cream bread. The milky flavor of ice cream was sandwiched between two pieces of bread. After taking a bite, the cold and soft feeling made her so addicted that she couldn't extricate herself. Even though it was winter, it didn't prevent her from eating one piece after another. Damn it, he had completely lost on this point. Looking at Ashes, who was smiling provocatively at her, Andrea didn't make any response for the first time. To be continued. Chapter 336. On the third day, with the completion of the assembly of the large hot air balloon, it was time to start exploring the ruins. The new hot air balloon was named Farsight. Its huge basket could accommodate even more witches, and it was also wrapped in canvas to protect it from the cold wind and snow. Because the sooner the operation was carried out, the safer it would be, so after a simple farewell to Roland, the witches boarded the hot air balloon one after another, rising from the castle's back garden and setting off in the direction of the stone tower. In order to quickly land and meet the enemy when they encountered danger, Farsight flew very low this time, almost skimming over the roofs of the town's houses. Most of the subjects witnessed this miracle, many of them were stunned in place, and some even shouted, "Long live His Highness Roland." Probably in their eyes, such a miracle could only be created by the Lord of Border Town. As they passed by the western wall, the soldiers of the First Army uniformly saluted the air. Whether it was Lightning or Maggie, they were all witches they were familiar with, especially the little girl Lightning, who often gave the artillery team directions, who received enthusiastic cheers from the soldiers. Soon, in the midst of scattered snowflakes, Farsight left Border Town behind and entered the concealing forest area. Tilly stood at the side of the basket, overlooking the boundless forest. The snowy season, which lasted for the entire months of demons, turned the world into a pure white. The top branches of the giant trees were all covered in snow, and at first glance it looked like a high platform protruding from the ground, flat and wide. On the other side of the field of view was a range of mountains, which appeared to be a touch of greenish-gray in the hazy fog. He could not see the foot of the mountains that were connected to the ground, and the undulating peaks in the distance seemed to be floating in midair. "What a beautiful scenery," Shavi sighed. "This is the first time I've seen the western region covered in snow." "You're a witch from the western region?" Vendi asked curiously. "I used to live in Fallen Dragon Ridge, which is close to the south and rarely snows in winter. Later, I heard the news of Lady Tilly opening up Sleeping Island, so I secretly took a boat to the port of Clearwater to meet up with the other witches." So that's how it is. Vendi smiled and shook her head. Our Royal Highness has always been complaining, why after the rumors of the Witch Cooperation Association settling down in border towns spread out, no witches have come. He is always one step too slow. Hey, did you also release the news to gather witches? They do, but unfortunately, they're not very experienced. I noticed them as soon as they arrived at Fallen Dragon Ridge, Ashes said proudly. I even caught him red-handed in Silver City. I think his name was Theo. You're also a witch, so of course you'll notice this strange rumor. Andrea curled her lips. If you hadn't met Lady Tilly, you might have already followed her to Border Town. I won't do it for Prince Roland. Oh, she imitated his voice and said, Your Highness, you're quite familiar with calling me that. Pfft, Tilly couldn't help but laugh out loud. Yesterday she had seen her sullen face, but now it seemed that she had returned to normal. On Sleeping Island, the only one who would dare to cause trouble for Ashes at any time was Andrea, who came from an illustrious family. Whether it's Sleeping Island or Border Town, we're all compatriots, so there's no need to distinguish between us. She turned her head and swept her eyes over the numerous witches in turn. Before setting out, everyone had already understood each other's abilities, so that when they encountered the enemy, they could more reasonably assign tasks. It could be said that the number of combat witches in Border Town was far less than in Sleeping Island, and even most of the witches weren't suitable for fighting. But it was also because of their unremitting efforts that Border Town had become what it was today. Tilly's eyes stopped on Anna. If she had to choose one among them that left the deepest impression on her, she was afraid that it would be this woman who had awakened in Border Town and had a deep influence on Roland. As long as she stood next to her, she could feel an indescribable sense of heaviness and peace. This was the first time she had experienced such a feeling. If she had to describe it, it would be like lying on a vast field, and the softness and solidity of her back would make her feel incomparably at ease. Except for when talking to Roland, Anna didn't talk much, and her expression rarely changed, but as long as she stood among the witches, it was difficult to ignore her. Moreover, according to Sylvie, Anna was also the first witch to evolve in Border Town. She possessed an astonishing amount of magic, and her black fire, which could change its form at will, was exceptionally powerful. Moreover, she was the first witch to finish reading the Natural Science Theoretical Foundation, which made Tilly feel like she was a confidant. This winter, if she could sit around the fireplace with her and discuss the magical knowledge in the book, it would be a very pleasant thing. Tilly was full of expectations for this. The fifth princess then moved her eyes to Lightning, who was outside the basket. As the daughter of Thunder, she had many similarities with the first explorer of the fjords. Lively, curious, and full of action, she was born to fly, Tilly thought. Only the vast and boundless sky could accommodate her endless galloping heart. Although Thunder hoped that his daughter could live an honest life, after seeing the little girl, Tilly understood that she was destined to become an explorer, and maybe her achievements would even surpass her father. The only thing she could do was to protect her as much as possible. We're almost there. While she was thinking, Lightning had already approached the basket and announced to everyone. Come in and rest. Vendi showed a concerned look. Your lips are frozen white. It's nothing, it's just that my face is a bit numb. She patted her rosy white face. Fortunately, I have the scarf that His Highness gave me, so my ears aren't cold at all. Along the way, they didn't encounter any fierce demons. The demonic beasts that passed through the forest would occasionally raise their heads and roar, but they obviously didn't have the ability to attack the hot air balloon in the sky, so the first half of the journey could be considered smooth. But when the hawk gazer arrived above their destination, everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. They saw that the forest looked as if it had been swept by something huge, and there were scattered tree trunks and broken branches everywhere. The accumulated snow had been turned over and mixed with the soil, looking very messy. Where's the stone tower? Ashes asked. It was originally there. Lightning pointed to the empty space under her feet, her voice full of disbelief. It is gone. Tilly looked in the direction she was pointing, and saw a huge hole in the brown and white ground. It was so dark that the bottom couldn't be seen, as if someone had dug a passage to the abyss. But according to the size of the hole, the body of the person who dug it must have been astonishingly large. Sylvie, see what's in the hole. Sylvie's eyebrows quickly wrinkled, and her face looked very ugly. A maggot-like monster, it's moving in the northwest direction. Wait, the ruins are in its stomach. What, in its stomach? Ashes said in surprise. Yes, I saw the stone tower, and the ice crown that you were talking about. She carefully identified. Oh my God, it swallowed the entire ruins. What should they do next? Everyone looked at Tilly at the same time. Besides the insects, is there nothing else? The fifth princess asked in a deep voice, especially the demons. Well, there are still some demonic beasts, but they're all in its stomach, and it looks like they're already dead. Sylvie observed for a while, then shook her head. Chapter 337. Tilly, you can't. Ashes was just about to stop her, but she was interrupted. If we want to enter the cave, we must rely on witches with the ability to fly to bring people out. Tilly shook the ring on her finger. Although carrying a heavy object will consume a lot of magic power, at least I can bring an extra witch, which is crucial for the operation. With one more witch, we can deal with more situations. She paused and looked at the witches of Border Town. Anna, Lightning, Maggie, I need your help. The three didn't express any objection, and the little girl showed an eager expression. Tilly was a little relieved. Then the people going to the bottom of the cave, together with Ashes, Shavy, and Sylvie, the rest of the sisters, I'll leave the entrance to the surface to you. Lady Tilly, let me go with you, Andrea said. In case we encounter a group of demonic beasts, Nightingale won't be able to handle it alone. She shook her head. You and her, one far away and one close, can cooperate with each other. Don't worry, I'll guard the exit for you. Nightingale seemed full of confidence. Whether it's the devil or the demonic beasts, they won't be able to get close to this place. Tilly thought about it very clearly. The number of witches that could go down depended on the carrying capacity of the flying witches. First of all, the heaviest thing was the ice coffin. If it couldn't be awakened on the spot and had to be cut and taken away, it would be equivalent to the weight of at least 2 or 3 witches. Only Shavy's invisible barrier could carry such a heavy object. Sylvie's eye of magic was necessary. Without her, they wouldn't be able to find the exact location of the ruins in the monster's belly. Anna's cutting and heating abilities were the same, but both of them couldn't fly. Fortunately, they were relatively light, so Maggie could transform into the demon bird and carry them. Finally, the extraordinary Ashes, who could fight steadily in any situation, could be carried by herself. Although Lightning could fly, according to her own statement, once she carried someone, her altitude would drop very much, and she might not be able to fly out of this deep cave. Her advantage lay in her excellent agility and speed, which could effectively serve as a warning, scouting, and pincer attack. The importance of these witches was almost irreplaceable, and the loss of even one of them would make things extremely difficult. Therefore, his decision to go down was not an impulsive one, but rather a decision made after careful consideration. As for Andrea, her destructive power was amazing in close combat, but once she encountered a narrow area where one could not even see their own fingers, her ability would be greatly reduced. It would be better to guard the ground with Nightingale and watch out for the demonic beasts wandering nearby. It wasn't that Tilly hadn't considered giving up on the rescue and returning home. However, she had an uneasy premonition in her heart. Why did they choose this stone tower when the surrounding areas were all intact? Especially in the direction where the giant beast was crawling. She looked towards the mountains in the northwest. Beyond that was the place where the demons lived. Was there a connection between the two? Under the control of Vendi and Anna, the hot air balloon quickly landed steadily. Tilly put aside the distracting thoughts in her mind and reviewed the plan once again. She took a deep breath and said word by word, "Let's go." This pit was deeper than she had expected. It was about the height of a 2-story building. At the beginning, it went straight down, but not long after, it began to tilt and finally formed a horizontal passage. The surrounding soil gave off an unpleasant smell, and when they got closer, they could see the sticky liquid dripping from the surface of the soil, like the wet traces left behind by slugs. As the group continued to go deeper, the light coming in from the hole quickly disappeared. The entire bottom of the hole, except for the faint light from a few torches, was plunged into darkness. Not only that, but the whistling wind also quieted down, and the cold was gradually replaced by the heat of the ground. Tilly felt her body warming up. Looking at the flickering flames, she could not help but think of fireflies. "The giant beast is in front," at this moment, Sylvie softly said. But even without her reminder, everyone knew that they were not far from their goal. A strange sound came from the depths of the cave, somewhat like the rustling sound of the autumn wind blowing through the forest, but also like the sound of crunching and chewing. "Descend," she ordered Ashes, who was behind her, to wave the torch twice, and then controlled the magic stone to descend until their feet landed in the soft, sticky soil. Then Anna's cold eyes lit up. She changed the black fire back into the heart fire, and the cold and soft light suddenly sprinkled all around. Under the green light of the fire, the witches could clearly see the tail of the giant beast. It slowly crawled forward, its squirming gray skin constantly secreting mucus, and the smell of decay became stronger. "A disgusting big worm," Ashes pulled out her big sword. "What do we do next? Cut open its stomach?" "Wait, Anna has to kill it," Tilly shook her head. "I don't know if the thing in its stomach is a threat to us. It's too risky for you to approach it and swing your sword." "Well, let me try." Anna, while maintaining the green fire, once again summoned a ball of black fire. In the blink of an eye, the black fire turned into a thin line as thick as a finger, flying straight towards the giant beast. This thin line pierced through the monster's skin without any resistance, and cut towards the side of its belly. Perhaps because the temperature was too high, the skin that the black line touched immediately burst into flames, and the liquid in its body was vaporized, spewing out billowing white mist. Shavi, who was already equipped, raised an invisible shield, blocking the splashing liquid one by one. This is the power of evolution, Tilly thought, although Anna had introduced her ability before they set off, but seeing it with her own eyes still shocked her. She could freely move out of her body, and the thin black fire was sharper than any giant sword, and it was extremely difficult to observe its trajectory. Even if the enemy wanted to dodge it, they wouldn't be able to. The monster let out a sharp wail, and its body crazily wriggled. But the black fire continued to cut forward, and soon half of its fat body was shredded. Before the flowing liquid could get close to the witches, it was evaporated by another ball of green fire. Gradually, the giant beast stopped struggling, and its skin also loosened. "It's dead," Sylvie said. "Its heart has already stopped beating." "This guy also has a heart?" Ashes asked, pinching her nose. "In its head, it's almost as big as the basket of the Farsight." "And?" She paused. "It has magic flowing in its body." "So, this is a hybrid demonic beast?" "No one knows the answer," Tilly said. "The history books have very few records about demonic beasts in the barbarian land. There are too many unknown things here, so let's hurry and dig out the ice coffin first." After being burned again by Anna, the rancid smell was no longer as strong as before. Under the guidance of Sylvie, they quickly found the swallowed ruins. Of course, now the basement had become a mess of stones, and it was impossible to see its original appearance. Most of the stones of lighting that Lightning had mentioned had turned into balls of paste. Fortunately, the transparent crystal pillar was still as good as before. After flipping it out of the sticky belly, there was not even a trace of corrosion on it. The woman sealed in the crystal was still vivid and lifelike. Chapter 338. Genius 1 second. Remember love yo yo go. Say net, provide you with wonderful novels to read. Anna nodded, stretched the black fire into a thread, and gently pressed it against the crystal pillar. The witches couldn't help but hold their breath, only to see a burst of green smoke rise from the point of contact between the two. It wasn't the color of the smoke itself, but rather a different color under the reflection of the green fire. The black fire was embedded in the crystal. How is it? Tilly asked. It's a little strenuous, but it can be cut, Anna replied. Suddenly, the ice coffin changed, followed by a crisp cracking sound. Several cracks spread from the place where the black fire was embedded, like a spider web. In the blink of an eye covered the entire pillar. Almost at the same time, Shavi propped up a barrier, wrapping the witches inside. However, the expected explosion did not happen. The broken crystal collapsed piece by piece, revealing the core that was emitting cold air. This transparent pillar was actually composed of 2 layers, and the inner layer was a real ice crystal. In an instant, everyone felt a chill in their faces, and the surrounding temperature plummeted. Fortunately, Anna quickly maintained the falling temperature and brought it back to a normal state. Under the baking of the black fire, the ice crystal melted faster, its transparency also sharply decreased, and its shape no longer had edges and corners, shrinking and melting like ordinary ice cubes. But Tilly noticed that there was no large puddle of water on the ground. The melted part had all turned into smoke and drifted away, as if the ice coffin had never existed. When all the ice crystals melted, the real body of the woman sealed inside was revealed. She seemed to be still in a deep sleep, her long hair and robe were not wet, everything was no different from when she was frozen. Without the support of the pillar, her body weakly fell backwards, and then Ashes held her in her arms. Are you still alive? Although it's very weak, her heart hasn't stopped beating. Ashes pressed her hand on the other's chest. This is unbelievable. It was indeed incredible. Tilly found that ever since she had come to Border Town, in less than a week, she had seen more incredible things than she had seen in the past year. However, she was also a little relieved. Being able to survive in the extremely low temperature of the ice crystals, her identity had most likely been confirmed. She was a witch. At least this risky move wasn't for nothing. As for her name, where she came from, and why she was trapped in the ruins, these questions could wait until they returned. Andrea was a little bored as she stood guard beside the hole. From time to time, she would glance at the bottom of the hole, hoping to see Tilly return as soon as possible. There were no traces of demons around the ruins, and even demonic beasts were rarely seen. Occasionally, some common wolves or wild boars would emerge from the woods. Before they could even draw their bows, Nightingale had already nailed her dagger into their heads. The passage of time seemed to slow down. Except for her, all the witches guarding the hole were witches from the Witch Cooperation Association. Even if she wanted to find someone to pass the time, it was impossible. Although the woman named Vendi looked very kind, Andrea still couldn't make up her mind to take the initiative to talk to her. As an upper-class noble of the Kingdom of Dawn, elegance and modesty were essential qualities for an unmarried lady. Forget it, it was better to talk to Nightingale. She heard that Nightingale and Ashes had fought, and they were evenly matched. Since it was to inquire about the information of an old rival, it wasn't considered taking the initiative to talk. Well, it was just a necessary job. She reached out to pat the snow off her head and looked up, but her heart suddenly jumped. Nightingale was gone. The woman with golden curls, who looked like an elegant noble, had been leaning against the side of the basket, but now she was nowhere to be seen. That's right, her ability seemed to be to hide herself. Thinking of this, Andrea calmed down and felt the surrounding sounds. When vision couldn't be used, ears and nose were good helpers in tracking the opponent's whereabouts. Then she heard the sound of soft footsteps. Was it Nightingale? No, Andrea felt her hair stand on end. These footsteps obviously couldn't be made by one person. A group of people was approaching, in the forest ahead, only 100 steps away from her. However, as far as she could see, it was still calm, and not a single person could be seen. The sound of the footsteps was very close. Damn it, the enemy was transparent. She was just about to sound the alarm when a roar suddenly bloomed in her ears. Flames suddenly appeared in midair, and then the air shook, and a strange monster emerged. It had a long and narrow head and 2 sharp sickles, looking like a mutated mantis, but unlike any other insect, it walked upright. The arrow shot from the flintlock shattered the side of its face, and black blood spurted from its skull, almost splashing Andrea. The monster crashed to the ground, and then she saw Nightingale's fluttering white cloak and hood. Then there was a second gunshot. Damn it, I was too careless. Andrea bit her lips, she had noticed it earlier than she did. She summoned her magic longbow, but she didn't know where to shoot, so she slowly retreated to the side of the basket and stood with the other witches. 4 gunshots, and 4 monsters fell, all killed in one shot. When Nightingale appeared next to a monster, Andrea put away her weapon and quickly walked over. What's this? It's either a demonic beast or a devil. She squatted down and fiddled with the enemy's claws and sickles, but from the color of the blood, it's more like a demonic beast. When did you find them? From the moment they appeared, Nightingale smiled. In the fog, their magic radiance was as conspicuous as the stars in the night sky. Can demonic beasts also have this ability? Andrea frowned. The other party's smile froze. Maybe mixed species are special. At this time, the witches who went to the depths of the cave also returned to the surface. In addition to the original 7 witches, there was also a blue-haired woman on Ash's shoulder. Is she the one who asked for help in the ruins? Andrea stepped forward and asked. That's right, Tilly nodded. I'll tell you the details on the hawk gazer. The longer we stay in this forest, the more uneasy I feel. By the way, did we encounter any dangerous situations up there? There were a few strange mixed species of demonic beasts, but they're all dead, Nightingale shrugged. The hot air balloon quickly inflated and rose into the sky. The basket crossed the treetops and began to move in the direction of the town. At this moment, Sylvie let out a cry of alarm. Heavens, what are those things down there? Demonic beasts? Demonic beasts? Andrea looked in the direction of the ruins, but she didn't see anything. That's not right, there was indeed something moving on the ground. The corpse of the monster that had originally fallen to the ground was suddenly missing half its body, and the black bloodstains were trampled on and scattered. Some strange twisting movements could be seen at the junction of the mud and snow, as if they were looking through a glass. If one didn't look carefully, it would be difficult to notice these changes. It's those strange mixed species again, Nightingale said carelessly. There are about 100 of them, and they're all fighting to be the first to run into the cave. Could it be that they were attracted by that big worm and want to eat their fill? She yawned, but this has nothing to do with us. Chapter 339. Vader got off the bed and tried to move his body. He didn't feel any pain from his back. It seemed like Sir Knight was right. As long as he ignored the wound, it would quickly heal. Don't you want to rest for a few more days? Kakasim asked. He only gave me 2 days. Vader put on his shabby coat and put on his cold boots. Moreover, the earlier I work for them, the earlier I can get my share of the oatmeal. I can't always eat yours. 1 bowl isn't even enough for 2 people. I think it's pretty good. The oatmeal here is much thicker than the relief porridge in other places. Furthermore, I can taste a little meat. The old man shook his head. Child, you used to be a patrol member, so you might not be familiar with life in the slums. The porridge there is just like clear soup, but there are a few grains of wheat in the soup. In order to make it look more substantial, grass roots or leaves are often added and cooked together. The oatmeal distributed by Sir Lord might not be enough to fill your stomach, but you won't go hungry either. I want both of us to eat our fill. He finished tying his shoes and smiled. All right. Kakasim sighed. Then take care of your body and don't try to be brave. Vader thought to himself. He was obviously just a scapegoat chosen by a black street rat, but now he seemed like his elder. What was even stranger was that he actually felt that this wasn't a bad feeling. I will. He shook his head in amusement and put on his hood. You too. Just as he pushed the door open, he saw 2 men standing outside. Their white uniforms embroidered with light blue shoulder stripes and armbands indicated their identities. They were clerks of the city hall. Vader couldn't help but frown slightly. Who are you looking for? One of them took out a piece of paper and glanced at it. "You're Vader." "Yes." "What happened?" Kakasim also noticed the situation outside the house. "Congratulations." The other man smiled. "You've passed the public security officer's paper test. Next, you'll be undergoing a week of comprehensive training." He handed a small card to Vader. "This is your temporary identification card. Bring it to the Second Army's camp. Someone will receive you there." The latter's eyes widened. "I passed his lordship's assessment." "Not yet," the clerk replied. "The paper test is only the first round of screening. You still have to complete the training and get the approval of the chief knight before you pass the assessment and become an official member of the public security team." After the two of them finished talking, they left directly. They didn't ask for money, nor did they try to win him over. It seemed that they had come specifically to inform him. "You've succeeded." The old man patted Vader's shoulder excitedly. "What did you say back then? You would never be chosen." Vader stared blankly for a long time before muttering, because those questions were too strange. The old man was taken aback. What problem? He couldn't help but recall what had happened a week ago. Ever since he learned that His Royal Highness was recruiting members of the public security force, which was the patrol guards under a different name, he had followed the requirements of the announcement and applied to the city hall. The other party's response was quite fast. In just 5 days, he received the test notice. Vader was full of confidence. Not only did he completely meet the requirements of the announcement, he also had more than 5 years of practical experience. Furthermore, this small town was indeed lacking in personnel to supervise the people. Therefore, the possibility of him being chosen was extremely high. If he could become a patrol guard, he could help Kakasim at any time even if he lived in the inner city. However, he didn't expect that the test would exceed everyone's expectations right from the start. More than 100 candidates were seated in a large hall. The chief knight handed out a stack of paper to each of them, requesting them to answer all of the questions listed on it. The questions were written neatly on the paper, and he also said that the final examiner would be His Royal Highness. This kind of test method immediately caused a huge uproar among the crowd. Although the announcement clearly stated that the candidates had to be literate, no one expected that the other party would actually do it for real. At that time, more than half of the people were dumbfounded. Although Vader could understand the questions on the paper, after carefully scanning through them, he was also stunned on the spot. They were all strange questions. For example, you are a coachman driving a 4-wheeled carriage on a narrow mountain road. There are 2 commoners sitting in the carriage. At this time, a group of refugees suddenly appears in front of you. You can't avoid them in time and can only choose to collide with them, or let the carriage fall off the cliff. The former will cause the deaths of many refugees, while the latter will cause the deaths of 2 commoners. No matter what the situation is, you will be able to survive by relying on your agility. Then your choice will be, please use at least 300 words to explain the reason. This question was simply confusing. Although it was mentioned that one side was a commoner and the other side was a refugee, the specific number was all vague. Even if they wanted to make a comparison, they didn't know where to start. Moreover, he always felt that while it didn't seem like a big deal to kill a group of refugees, it might not necessarily be the answer that His Royal Highness wanted. In that case, was choosing to let the commoners die the correct answer? Furthermore, the entire piece of paper was filled with similar strange questions. At that time, he even felt that His Royal Highness was deliberately making things difficult for them, when in fact, the real public security personnel had already been determined. It's nothing. Perhaps I was thinking too much. Vader took a deep breath. In that case, I'll go to the camp now. Yes. Kakasim laughed loudly. I feel that you will definitely become an official public security personnel. The camp of the Second Army was located to the north of the town, outside the stone walls of the inner city. When Vader arrived, he found that the chief knight was already waiting for him in the camp. From today onwards, you will all be probationary policemen. After everyone had arrived, Carter opened his mouth and said, "For the next week, you must live in this camp and receive special training. Those who are qualified will stay, and those who are unqualified will scram back to where they came from. I will let you understand what is called discipline, and what is called serving His Royal Highness." This was how the examination should be in Vader's memory. However, out of the 100 or so applicants, only 15 remained. He glanced left and right. Judging from their attire and complexion, the rest of them should be local residents, apart from himself. Sure enough, the requirement of literacy was not a joke. "Report." Someone raised his hand. Carter grinned. "Oh, you seem to be quite familiar with the military. Speak." "Hee, my brother is in the First Army." That person touched the back of his head and said, "May I ask, sir, what is a police?" "Aren't we public security personnel?" "The police is part of the public security system. You can think of it as the public security personnel in His Royal Highness territory. They are required to arrest criminals, crack down on illegal acts, maintain order in the territory, execute the policies issued by His Royal Highness and City Hall, and help the subjects who encounter difficulties." "Help the subjects?" "But you just said that we are serving His Royal Highness. There is no difference between the two. Serving His Royal Highness's subjects is also serving His Royal Highness. Why, do you still want to enter the castle to serve him?" Carter shrugged. "First become an outstanding knight." However, knight were all nobles. Vader thought that their status was worlds apart from commoners like them. It was not something that could be done just because one wanted to. Remember, you are the executors of the law, and also the protectors of the people. Now, go to the tent and change into your uniforms. Chief Knight clapped his hands. "Next, I happen to have a task for you to complete." Chapter 340. When Vader took off his patched coat and put on a brand new uniform, he felt his whole body become warm. The surface of the uniform was made of thick leather, and the inside was lined with cotton, which not only kept the leather warm, but also retained the softness of the cloth. Just these materials alone were probably worth several silver royals. Although the style was similar to the City Hall uniform, the color was very different. The bottom color was pure black, and the shoulders, collar, and cuffs were inlaid with white stripes, which looked very eye-catching. After the 15 people put on the new uniform and stood in a row again, they couldn't help but puff out their chests a little more. "Not bad." Carter smiled with satisfaction. "Now, follow me." At this time, the sky was still lightly snowing. This was the first time that Vader had seen snow fall continuously since autumn. Occasionally, it would snow in Valencia, but it would stop after 1 or 2 days at most. Children often piled up snow dolls on the streets, or rolled them into snowballs and threw them here and there. Therefore, there was a saying that snowy days were childhood festivals. However, it was very inconvenient for adults. The accumulated snow would make shoes wet and moldy, it would be difficult to walk on the streets, and the shops would be closed off. Occasionally, the snow would crush the roofs of the houses. At this time, the patrol would definitely not go out. If they did go out, they would find a tavern and sit around the fireplace, drinking warm ale and flirting with the maids. However, none of this could be seen in Border Town. Every day, there would be people clearing the snow on the streets and sweeping it to the sides. This was a long-term recruitment job issued by the City Hall, which could be paid daily or monthly. It could be considered a job with low returns but quick money. Many townspeople came and went on the streets. Some of them wore straw hats, while others wore cloaks. All of them were busy with their own work. If all the snow in the town was removed, it wouldn't be a problem to say that it was summer. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Vader wouldn't have believed that a small town on the border of the kingdom could be even busier than Valencia. If it weren't for the fact that there were no towering churches and bell towers in the town, he would really think that he was in a big city. Soon, the group arrived at the pier. There were more than 10 sailboats anchored in the Redwater River, and hundreds of people had already gathered on the shore. This scene seemed familiar. Yes, Vader remembered that this was also the scene when he and the other Eastern region refugees arrived at the town. Report, who are these people? Refugees from the south and the north. In order to let them safely survive the winter, His Highness specially sent people to summon them to Border Town. Your task is to assist the City Hall in maintaining order. Let these people line up and pass through the checkpoint one by one, then go through the quarantine and registration. Carter instructed. Currently, there are not many policemen, so the First Army will assist you. In the future, you will have to complete this task independently. Yes. It did not sound difficult. It was no different from ordering refugees to line up for porridge. Vader walked to the front of the checkpoint and began to shout loudly. He wanted the people nearby to listen to his commands and gather around him. Where did you get your name from? Is there anything you're good at? Can you read? Every fugitive who passed through the checkpoint would be questioned by the City Hall staff, and then roughly recorded down. Vader knew that this was only the preliminary statistics. After everyone had settled down, there would be a further examination and verification. Those who had specialties would be given priority to be transferred to the inner city. He had personally experienced this process once. Suddenly, there was a commotion behind him. Vader turned his head and saw a man dressed in a fluffy robe arrive at the pier under the protection of a group of guards. His flying long gray hair indicated his identity. He was the local lord, His Highness Roland Wimbledon. In addition, there were a few people dressed in luxurious clothes standing beside him. They should be the leaders of the City Hall. Vader did not expect that His Highness would brave the wind and snow to personally inspect this batch of refugees. This surprised him slightly. During the bitter cold season, few great nobles were willing to leave their warm beds early in the morning, especially when there were servants taking care of everything. My name is Maine, a northerner. Yes, I'm good at farming. I can't read. Farming? The City Hall official ticked the corresponding box on the registration form. All right, you may go. At this moment, Vader noticed that the other party glanced in the direction of His Highness as he passed through the checkpoint. There was not a trace of reverence in his eyes, which was completely different from the eyes of an ordinary commoner. Wait, Vader said subconsciously. What's wrong? You're a farmer. When should winter wheat be sown? The City Hall official also looked at him with a somewhat impatient expression. This is only the preliminary registration. I don't have the time to determine if they are telling the truth one by one. Didn't Lord Carter explain the process clearly to you? You just need to help me maintain order. Hearing the other party's words, the man immediately shut his mouth. What an idiot. Vader frowned and ignored him. You don't sound like a northerner. Instead, you sound like the accent of the central region of the kingdom. I'm very familiar with the town in the northern region. Maine hesitated for a moment and still did not reply. And your attire? Even if you didn't freeze to death in the northern region, your fingers would have been frozen. The temperature there is below freezing all year round. Vader grabbed his right hand. Where are your gloves? Don't tell me that you threw them away when you came to Border Town and found the temperature here to be warmer. This time, the personnel at the checkpoint also realized that something was wrong. If he lied about being good at something, it might be because he wanted to get better treatment. However, it was very strange to hide his origins. Where did you come from? Maine clenched his teeth and suddenly took out a red pill from his bosom. He slammed it into his mouth and roared, "All of you, get out of my way." Vader immediately felt that the other party's wrist had become boiling hot. He reflexively wanted to press Maine to the ground, but found that even if he used all his strength, the other party would not budge. Then, Maine raised his arm and Vader felt his whole body fly up. He fell heavily to the ground and a burning pain came from his back. Damn it, the wound has split open. He spat out some saliva and shook his dizzy head. He turned over and got up, but Maine was no longer in his original position. 4 or 5 refugees scuttled out of the crowd. Their movements were as agile as the demonic beasts outside the city walls. With a few strides, they directly jumped over the temporary railings of the city hall and ran straight towards His Royal Highness. The purpose of this group of people could not be more obvious. They were after the high-ranking officials and the Lord of Border Town. Thinking of Maine's monstrous strength, Vader could almost imagine the scene of His Royal Highness' personal guards being torn to shreds on the spot. Even the prince himself would not be able to escape. However, none of these things happened. Very soon, he heard a series of banging sounds, similar to the situation when the soldiers on the city walls were fighting against the demonic beasts. White smoke floated in front of the prince. Maine's head turned into a splatter of blood in the smoke. Chapter 341. The freaks who had rushed out of the crowd were all killed. The sudden turn of events caused a wave of panic among the refugees. Dozens of soldiers carrying strange weapons surrounded them. The scene was filled with cries of alarm, and the situation gradually became uncontrollable. At this moment, His Royal Highness' resonant voice suddenly resounded above the crowd. "Silence, my people. I am your lord, Roland Wimbledon. Now, listen to me." Although his voice was loud, it was not a hysterical roar, but a clear and steady statement. Vader felt as if the other party was speaking right next to his ear. His words had an unquestionable power that suppressed the noise and panic of the scene. The crowd suddenly quieted down. "Just as you heard the news when you came, Border Town will provide you with shelter from the wind and snow, food that can fill your stomachs, and many well-paid jobs. I am here to tell you that all of this is true. The houses are made of thick mud, without a single gap for the wind to leak through. There is a charcoal stove under the bed, and sleeping on it is as comfortable as lying on the grass that has been baked by the summer sun. As long as the doors and windows are closed, you will not feel the slightest bit cold in the room even if you only wear a thin layer of clothing. The food is oatmeal accompanied by jerky. If you dig it up with a spoon, you can see the grains of oatmeal dripping down. When you pour it into your mouth, it will also slowly fall due to its high viscosity. Just one bowl is enough to fill your stomach." Hearing this, Vader suddenly felt hungry. The content of His Royal Highness' speech was very novel. Unlike most nobles, who repeatedly emphasized their own power and obligations to their subjects, he did not declare that everyone under his rule must obey his will. Instead, he described his promise from the perspective that the people were most concerned about, through food and clothing. Looking at the fascinated expressions on the faces of the refugees by the pier, he knew that his words were undoubtedly more moving. "I hope that all my subjects can live a good life without worrying about food and clothing. However, the enemies hiding in the dark do not wish to see this scene. These wild beasts that rushed out were undoubtedly sent by them. The reason is very simple. They do not wish to see me alive, nor do they wish for my subjects to live a comfortable life. If I am not here, will there be other lords who will provide warm housing and delicious food? You should all be very clear on this point. Just look at your previous encounters and you will understand. I'm the only one who is willing to do this." Vader discovered that the panic had dissipated. When those abnormally moving monsters were viewed as a common enemy, the unease and worry of the refugees gradually turned into anger. Murderers who tried to harm His Highness were also villains who wanted to destroy their beautiful lives. Such people could not be forgiven. In order to prevent another attack from happening again, the inspection will need to be repeated. This time, my personal guards will be in charge of the body search and verification. Do not let any enemy have the chance to destroy everything. Everyone obeyed His Royal Highness' order, and those who had already passed the checkpoint were brought back to the dock area by the guards. No one protested, and the order was even more orderly than before. As expected of His Highness, Vader couldn't help but sigh with emotion. With just a few words, he was able to dispel the panic that was about to occur. "I heard that you were the first to discover the problem." Carter Lannis walked over and said, "Come with me, His Highness wants to see you." He followed behind the chief knight and came before the young prince. He knelt down on one knee and said, "I pay my respects to you. Tell me, how did you see that there was something wrong with him?" asked the prince. Vader reported his findings as they were. Keen observation. You were just an ordinary civilian before. No, Your Highness. I used to serve in the Valencia patrol, he answered honestly. I worked there for almost 6 years, until Valencia was attacked by a large number of pirates. But your resume doesn't indicate any specialties, said the prince. I asked Carter about it, and he said that you're still in the temporary residential area. In other words, when you registered the early residence at the city hall, you hid your experience, and it was completely unnecessary. Why? Although he didn't understand what the word resume meant, it didn't affect his answer. Vader hesitated for a moment, then told the prince about Kikuzim. If it weren't for this prisoner, I wouldn't have been able to come to Border Town alive, so I couldn't leave him alone in the Western District. So I wanted to become a patrol member. In the future, when I carry out patrol tasks, I can give him extra care. Vader's heart suddenly tightened. From the previous sentence, he could see that His Highness was very concerned about whether he had violated the rules. What he had done was obviously suspicious. Don't worry, you haven't done it yet. You won't be punished just because of your ideas. The prince seemed to have seen through his thoughts and smiled. However, this sentence also made Vader feel a little disappointed. There was no doubt that His Highness didn't approve of this method. Even if he successfully became a police officer, once he handled a dispute with bias, he would only follow in the footsteps of the city hall clerk. Do you have any family? The prince suddenly asked. They were all killed in the raid in Valencia, Roland said. What about Kikuzim? I don't think so. Although he didn't understand why His Highness would ask this, Vader still answered honestly. If he did, the rats wouldn't have chosen him as a scapegoat. Anyone with any specialties can get the right to rent a house in a residential area, get an identity card issued by the city hall, and enjoy all the rights of a subject. This naturally includes their families. The prince smiled. You should be able to understand what I mean, right? Vader was startled and couldn't help but say in surprise, you agree to let me take Kikuzim. Take the old man to the city hall to register. They'll arrange it for you. He suppressed his excitement and knelt down again. Your Highness is merciful. Don't relax. Maintain your vigilance today. The prince nodded. If you can't pass the subsequent tests, even if you become his family, you can only stay in the temporary residential area for the time being. Yes. Vader felt much more relaxed now that he finally had something to worry about. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly remembered the paper test. After hesitating for a while, he couldn't help but ask, Your Highness, during the first test, I didn't know the answers to many questions and wrote them down randomly. Why did you still choose me? Because there are no correct answers. The prince curled his lips. Every answer differs from person to person. The key point of this test is not the answers, but the candidate's literacy and writing skills. As long as you can understand the questions and write down your own thoughts, you pass the test. Chapter 342. Your Highness, do you know who sent these people? After Vader left, Carter approached and asked. The only one who has the pills, besides the church, is Timothy. Garcia is now far away from Grey Castle, so it's unlikely that she still cares about me. Roland sighed. Compared to the former, Timothy is more likely. He doesn't dare to easily send an army out of King's City, but it doesn't mean that he won't retaliate against me. Fortunately, these attackers who had blended into the crowd only carried pills, not gunpowder. Otherwise, if they exploded in the crowd, the efforts of the past 2 months would have been in vain. Roland wasn't worried that the suicide squad he had sent out would threaten him. During the days when Nightingale wasn't here, he brought more than 10 guards with him wherever he went, and he also wore a god's stone of retaliation. Even an extraordinary would find it difficult to approach him under the suppression of 10 revolvers, let alone a madman who had taken drugs. He found that his mentality had changed a lot in less than a year since he became the Lord. If he had just arrived here and seen such a situation, he would inevitably feel weak in the knees and be at a loss. But just now, although he felt a little nervous, he still pretended to be calm on the surface. He knew that the guards would definitely stand in front of him and stop the enemy at all costs. As the focus of the crowd, he could not afford to lose his composure in the slightest. Even he was surprised by this thought. Call the people of the emissary delegation here and ask them about the details of the recruitment process. Roland turned to Berev and said, I need to know where these people boarded the sailboat. Yes, Your Highness. The face of the city hall supervisor was a little gloomy. He probably didn't expect that the subordinate he was proud of would make such a big mistake, and he felt quite embarrassed. Don't be too harsh on them, ask them about the situation first. After all the refugees had passed through the checkpoint, Roland returned to his office in the castle. This time, the news brought back by the emissary delegation made him very surprised. In the southern region, there were a large number of homeless people. Eagle City and Port of Clearwater were destroyed by the flames of war, and many fields outside the city were abandoned. Coupled with this year's strange weather, the temperature in Grey Castle had plummeted. The price of food was rising day by day, and even the price of slaves had fallen by half. As long as he could establish a reliable transportation channel, he could bring a steady stream of people into the western region. In fact, according to the report of the emissary mission, after hearing the recruitment order for Border Town, there were already many refugees who had begun to move towards the western region on their own initiative. However, the difficulty lay in the transportation channel. During the months of the demons, the heavy snow blocked the entire land transportation. If they wanted to bring people in, they could only transport them through the Redwater River. But Border Town only had one ship, the Little Town, which couldn't move without the help of a witch. It was far from enough to meet the demand. If they wanted to have ships sailing on the channel all the time, they would need to invest at least 20 or so river sailboats. For example, the emissaries sent out this time were in such a predicament, only a small part of the golden dragon they brought with them was used to rope in the refugees, and the rest was spent on hiring ships and settling people. At present, only 400 people had arrived in Border Town, and there were still more than 3,000 people stranded in Willow Town, Silver City, and Fallen Dragon Ridge, waiting for ships to transport them. In addition, the ship owners were aware of the current situation in the western region, so they raised the price very high. Just these 3,000 people alone were estimated to cost the same as the previous rescue in King's City. This was simply not a long-term solution. Roland thought for a while and decided to send a letter to Marjorie's Chamber of Commerce for help, hoping that the other party would consider lightning and not quote a price several times higher. But if he wanted to completely cut off this part of the expenditure, he still had to build his own ships. Now that the quality of steel and cement had been greatly improved, it was completely possible to build stronger and larger river boats, using steam engines as power to build the Redwater River transportation line. After lunch, Berev knocked on the door and came in. Your Highness, the situation has been roughly understood. Speak. A disciple named Salem was responsible for going to the northern region to rope in refugees. On the way back, due to the lack of ships, he contacted a friend he met in King's City, hoping that they could help him inquire about or hire some merchant ships willing to go to the western region. Berev sighed. The news must have leaked from here. He settled the refugees in Silver City, which is only half a day's journey from King's City. It wouldn't be difficult for Timothy to do something to them if he wanted. How many people are currently stranded in Silver City? About 800, Berev whispered. It takes half a month for a merchant ship to go back and forth. When the next batch of refugees arrives, we still don't know what will happen. How about, we immediately recall the First Army and give up on these people? No. We'll just get rid of them one by one, no matter how many people Timothy inserted. When the time comes, we just have to check the checkpoints and let them pass separately. Roland shook his head. If we leave the refugees in Silver City and ignore them, what if someone returns to the northern region and spreads the news of what happened to them? We won't be able to recruit anyone from there anymore. With Sylvie's X-ray vision and Nightingale's incantation, no spy or assassin could hide, so he wasn't worried about this. It would be fine as long as they didn't hurt the other refugees. Yes, Your Highness. Barav coughed twice before asking, then, how about Salem's punishment? What do you think? What do you think? He hesitated for a moment. This happened because he was too careless. I suggest that he be removed from his position in City Hall and fined 2 months' salary. Salem's mistake wasn't intentional and didn't cause too much damage, so it's not appropriate to send him to the North Slope mine. Roland couldn't help but laugh. Barav's pained expression was written all over his face. Don't worry, I've already made up my mind. Considering that his mistake was due to his lack of experience and not a subjective dereliction of duty, I can give him a lighter punishment. After all, this is the first time he's held such a position. I remember he's only in his 20s, right? In that case, I'm sure he'll grow up quickly after this lesson. Just fine him 2 months' salary. Yes, Your Highness. Barav immediately bowed and said, "We'll do as you say." The prince smiled and shook his head. Although he spoke extremely harshly in the beginning, when it came time to punish Salem, he showed an indiscernible sense of selflessness. After all, Salem had always been by his side when he was in King's City. He was also one of the first batch of disciples to arrive in Border Town. In Barav's eyes, Salem was almost like a child that he had raised himself. You can leave now. After dealing with this matter, Roland stretched his body. He took out a few blank pieces of paper from the drawer and was about to draw a sketch of the steam cement ship when Leaf suddenly ran in. Your Highness, she said excitedly, the Farsight is back. Really? Roland stood up abruptly and followed her to the back garden with quick steps. He saw the huge hot air balloon slowly descending, and the shadow of the air sac caused the light in the courtyard to dim. As soon as the basket landed, Anna jumped down. Roland opened his arms and went forward to welcome her. The latter smiled and gently hugged him. I'm back. Chapter 343. Me too. Lightning threw herself at Roland. Me too. Nana shouted. Coo. Maggie followed closely behind. Roland simply stood where he was and let all the members of the Witch Union hug him one by one. Tilly could not help but laugh. You really have a good relationship with them. Do you also need a hug from your brother? No, thank you. She smiled and shook her head. I still remember clearly the scene when you picked me up and threw me to the ground. Roland could only shrug his shoulders to express his innocence. Then he shifted his gaze to the woman in Ash's arms. She had sea blue hair, looked young, and her figure was similar to Anna's. Her eyes were closed, and her slender eyebrows were slightly raised. Her skin was fair, and the tear mole at the corner of her eye was particularly eye-catching. Judging from her appearance, she did not look like a prisoner trapped in the basement of the stone tower at all. Instead, she looked a bit like a sleeping beauty. However, compared to her appearance, what caught Roland's attention was her robe. In this era, he had rarely seen clothing with such exquisite and complex patterns. Due to the scarcity of dyes, Roland's base color was extremely rare. Coupled with the intertwining white stripes and sigils, it was simply like a gorgeous robe that could only be seen in the movies. This must be an orange equipment. Is she still alive? Yes. Nightingale said. But the magic power in her body has been exhausted. It's a bit like what happened to Anna when she was an adult. But unlike Anna, her magic power recovers very slowly. At this rate, it may take 3 or 4 days for her to return to normal. In that case, let's call her the sleeper for now. Roland nodded. I'll clear a room on the 3rd floor of the castle for her to recover. The rest of you, go back to the hall. He paused. I want to hear your story. After listening to Tilly and Nightingale's story, Roland could not help but break into a cold sweat for them. Although Sylvie had the whole picture, it was still very dangerous to go deep into the ground to chase a giant demonic beast that they had never seen before. If it were him, he would probably hesitate. He did not expect that Tilly would be so decisive. She chose the right people in such a short time and personally led the team. It could only be said that she became the leader of many witches not only because of her identity as a princess. Did you think that the burrowing worm was related to the devil? I don't know, but it's not impossible, Tilly said slowly. The witches of the Witch Cooperation Association once met a devil riding a hybrid demonic beast in the barbarian land. Their wings were cut off and they obeyed the devil's command, a bit like a tamed animal. Behind the snow-capped mountain, you also saw a flying beast that was completely different from the demons. Perhaps it was a different kind of demonic beast. So it can be inferred that demons and demonic beasts have a subordinate relationship, just like humans and hounds. So it can be inferred that the devil and the demonic beasts have a subordinate relationship, just like humans and hounds. It feels like that's the case. Roland nodded, but there was still a ball of inexplicable confusion in his heart. Demonic beasts would only take the initiative to attack human settlements during the months of the demons, but that did not mean that they could only live during the months of the demons. The moss and weeds on the shells of the demonic beasts were proof that these monsters could survive for decades. The demonic beasts would only take the initiative to attack human settlements during the months of the demons, but it did not mean that they could only live during the months of the demons. The moss and weeds on the carapace of the siege beasts were proof that these monsters could live for decades. The other point was, he could not forget that during the first year of the months of the demons, the wolf-lion hybrid that had attacked Iron Axe had shown intelligence that was different from the smart animals. It could learn, analyze, and choose its course of action and target, which was already a level that the vast majority of creatures could not reach. If the long-lived hybrid demonic beasts had intelligence, it would be impossible for them to be tamed by another race. But I think that compared to the demonic beasts underground, the enemy that Miss Nightingale met outside the stone tower is more worrying, Tilly sighed. It can hide during the day, move quietly, and is almost impossible to guard against. Unfortunately, we know very little about demonic beasts, and have no idea how to deal with such a terrible opponent. If Nightingale hadn't seen it with her own eyes, I would not have believed that this kind of demonic beast actually exists. Roland spread his hands, but it seems that they have never appeared in the western region. Otherwise, every winter there would be a few of them, and Longsong's stronghold would have already been turned into ruins. But the longer the months of the demons, the more powerful the demonic beasts become. This is the conclusion of the history books. This time it began to snow in autumn, so the enemy we will face may be very powerful. The words, "we," made Roland's heart warm up, regardless of whether she saw him as a brother or not, at least as an ally. She had already regarded him and Border Town as one. Of course, this was for the sake of the witches. Then we can only let Nightingale monitor the defensive line. No, this winter will be handed over to Sylvie to guard, Tilly said. The city wall is divided into two sections, east and west, and it will take half a quarter of an hour to go around it. Miss Nightingale's workload is too much. As long as Sylvie stays in the castle, she will be able to observe the entire area of the city wall, and when she discovers a demonic beast, she can immediately notify the other witches. That's good, Roland nodded. That witch. Scroll hesitated for a moment. I still retain my previous opinion. Before we confirm her identity, she may be our enemy. I know, so I will temporarily put the God's Locket of Retribution on her. He exhaled. I hope this will not cause her to misunderstand us. Roland walked into the sleeper's bedroom, leaving only Anna to take care of her. How is it? Anna shook her head. There's still no reaction. Is that so? Roland walked to the bedside. The woman was lying quietly in the quilt. Although her eyes were still closed, the wrinkles between her eyebrows seemed to have faded a lot. Both Nana and Lily had used their abilities on her. The only thing they could do now was to wait quietly. She has been frozen for so long, but there is no trace left on her body. It's really incredible, he sighed. Just like I am not afraid of fire, Anna chuckled, her ability must be related to this. I heard that you cut open the ice coffin, Roland patted her head, amazing, Anna. It's not all because of me, she said seriously, this witch used her ability very cleverly. First, she used extremely low-temperature ice to completely freeze the circulation of her body, and then used ice crystals that were close to room temperature to completely seal the ice inside, so that it would not escape and melt. Regarding the control of her ability, she must have reached a very high level. Close to room temperature ice, this sounded very unreasonable, but Roland understood that the ability of a summoning which was the specific manifestation of magic power, just like the black fire that could change its shape and temperature at will. Anna paused, then said, when I cut into the outer layer of ice crystals, the whole ice coffin immediately fell apart, as if she had deliberately left a flaw. So I think, she had already expected such a day. You mean, she will definitely wake up? Chapter 344. Master, the city wall has been breached. I'm afraid the Allied army can't hold on much longer. Let's go. She could already hear the sounds of fighting outside. Walking out of the tower, she saw the dark clouds in the sky revealing a dim red light, as if wrapped in sticky blood. But my sister hasn't come back yet. She's a garrison guard. It's impossible for her to leave the line of defense. Kraft's voice became more and more anxious. If you die here, won't you let her down? After hesitating for a while, she finally nodded in agreement. I understand. There were fugitives everywhere on the streets. The guards maintained the precarious order and merged into the crowd. She could not help but follow everyone to the south gate. Kraft followed closely by her side and used his sturdy and burly body to protect her from being pushed down by the panicking crowd. It was a complete failure. Is this our end? She looked at the Tower of Babel behind her. It was the highest point of the city and also the central area of the Union. The flying demons had already carried mad demons to the top of the tower. Occasionally, a bolt of lightning would light up and shoot the demons down. But everything was useless. There were too many enemies. After hundreds of years of construction and development, the city had become the most prosperous holy city in the fertile plains. But today, it seemed like it was going to be destroyed. The efforts of a few generations could not save the tower. Just like a sandcastle that children spent an afternoon building, it only needed a blink of an eye to return to chaos and disorder. Passing through the south gate, the demons who had taken a detour had arrived. Those who could still fight spontaneously stepped forward and cooperated with the guards. But the other side not only had mad demons, but also fearsome demons and lords of hell. The difference in strength between the two sides was too great. After a wave of spears, dozens of people lay in pools of blood. Some had their abdomens pierced by iron spears, their steaming intestines sliding into the cold snow. Some only had their limbs cut off. They hugged their wounds and wailed in pain. Master, what are you doing? Kraft pulled her back. I can fight too. She took a deep breath. Let me go. No, you're far more important than them. You can't, let go. Her magic surged out and overflowed with cold air. She shook off the opponent's hand and then strode forward without looking back. Seeing the enemy's hideous mask and blood-dripping weapon less than 100 steps away, she felt her heart gradually tighten. But even so, she did not want to continue hiding behind the crowd. As a member of the Holy City, even if she had to die, she should die on the battlefield. Get out of the way. At this moment, a clear shout came from one side of the battlefield. A person descended from the sky like a god. With her back facing everyone, she raised the long sword in her hand. The reddish-brown hair was like a flame, instantly igniting the hope in everyone's hearts. The Union's blessed warriors. She is transcendent. Amidst the gasps of surprise, light began to flow between the blade of the sword. Soon, the sword turned into a dazzling gold. Like a newborn sun, rays of light shone on the ground. Even the dark red clouds in the sky did not dare to obscure its sharpness. Below the clouds, countless golden tassels were reflected. When the light reached its peak, the newcomer leaped forward and swung his sword at the attacking devil. All was silent. At that moment, time seemed to stop. Before the all-engulfing white light descended, the figure of the other party was like the last ray of darkness at dawn. Both the mad devils and the lords of hell collapsed in the face of this light. When she opened her eyes again, the snow in front of her had turned into scorched earth. The approaching enemy seemed to have never existed. Seeing this scene, the other demons retreated in unison. More blessed warriors also arrived at this time and joined the battlefield to pursue the fleeing enemy. The encirclement was broken. Go quickly. The sword-wielding witch seemed to have exhausted all her strength. She knelt on the ground on one knee and said, "Take this opportunity to leave this place quickly." "But, my lady, where can we go?" someone in the crowd asked. "Yes, where can we go?" she thought bitterly. Even the last holy city had fallen under the attack of the demons. Tens of thousands of people had died. They had used all their means, but they still could not turn the situation around. "Don't give up. We still have hope," the red-haired witch said firmly. "Cross the mountains, cross the rivers, and go to the barbarian land. But, there are only some backward villagers. We can rebuild the order. Go, as long as we survive, we will see the day of victory." "Master, why don't you go with them?" She led the group away from the crowd and hurried west. Apart from Karf and the family guards, the others had no fighting power. They were all servants and servants in the tower. "I left some key magic stones and documents in the laboratory building in the misty forest. Since we want to rebuild the order, these things are crucial to the witches. I want to bring them to the other side of the mountain. The demons are catching up." "Hammerstone, you go and stop them," Karf ordered. "Yes." She gritted her teeth and lowered her head. These mortals could only stop the demons, but they could not defeat them. This time, they might not have any chance of survival. But she had to leave them behind and go to her destination as soon as possible. She did not know why, but there were black and white spots in the sky. Her vision became blurry. Kraft panted as he followed behind. Even someone as strong as him was already extremely tired after 3 days of trekking in the snow. She looked behind her. There were more than 30 people in the team, but now there were only 6 left. Some people escaped halfway, and some people were seriously injured and left the team. "If the demons caught up again, don't worry, Master, you still have me." Karf seemed to see through her thoughts and comforted her. "I will do my best to delay them." "Why?" He was slightly stunned. "Why do you want to persist until the end?" "If we run away now, we might be able to survive," she said, puzzled. "We are witches, and we have always been superior. But you are just an ordinary person. Under normal circumstances, you wouldn't want to die with me. But you have never treated us harshly. Although I do not have magic power, I understand many things. It is my duty to protect you." There was a commotion behind her. Everyone knew that the last moment had arrived. "Master, go quickly, don't look back." The black and white spots increased. She stumbled into the basement and packed up the documents and magic stones on the table. Karf's words made her feel a little confused. For a long time, there had been a common view in the holy city that witches were people chosen by God. Those who could not gather magic power were ignorant and incompetent, and they were just the soil to cultivate them. But in this family guard captain, she saw courage and tenacity. He was not as incompetent as people said. In fact, they also had a side that witches could not reach. It was better to cooperate with them than to drive them unilaterally, at least in her stone tower. If that was the case, why did people 400 years ago fail? Suddenly there was a roar of demons outside the door. Damn, they came so fast. Her vision was already cloudy. Countless spots danced in front of her, almost filling up her entire field of vision. But she couldn't die here. She had to bring the results of her research out. She had to cross the mountains, cross the rivers, and go to the barbarian land to restore order. She took out an echo stone and injected magic power into it, making it continuously cry for help. With a loud noise, the wooden door was torn apart, and the demons had broken in. Hoping that someone could hear her cry for help, she drove all the magic power in her body, turning it into frost and spewing it out. The mad demon raised its spear, and its arm quickly swelled. The next moment, the cold hairs flew straight towards her. She could not help but close her eyes, and the black and white spots suddenly covered everything. Her vision turned dark, and the sound disappeared. Her body no longer felt cold. It was as if she was wrapped in a ball of soft velvet. It was as if she was not in a dark basement, but lying on a warm grass field. The pain that was about to pierce through her body did not come for a long time. Am I dead? After a long time, a slit appeared in the darkness, and then it became brighter and brighter. She tried to open her eyes slowly, and the hazy gray roof was reflected in her eyes. She heard someone say, "Your Highness, she is awake." Chapter 345. Your Highness. What a strange title, it sounds like something you would only hear in ancient stories. She tried her best to turn her eyes and look to the side. She saw a gray-haired man enter her field of vision, and there were a few women standing beside him. "How do you feel?" he asked in a low voice. She did not answer, but asked, "Where am I?" "Border town, west of the kingdom of Greycastle." Very good, things were developing in the direction that she did not want to see. Unknown place, unknown time, unknown people. She wanted to turn over and get out of bed, but found that she could not muster any strength. "I am the fourth prince of the kingdom of Greycastle, lord of Border Town, Roland Wimbledon," he said again. "These are members of the Witch Union." "You don't remember anything?" "Witch Union?" She frowned. "They are actually witches." Although she did not know what kind of new organization it was, at least they were of the same kind. But why do they look like subordinates of this man? "Wait, Prince?" She recalled for a while and could not help but be stunned. Isn't this the name of the secular regime during the first battle of Divine Will more than 400 years ago? Did I go back to the time before the war? Could it be that God had given her another chance to make preparations in advance to save the sacred city and its people? No, calm down, she told herself. This kind of unreasonable thing only happens in fictional taverns. Right, what did I encounter in the end? In the basement of the laboratory building, a group of mad demons rushed in. She released all her magic power to build the strongest ice barrier. The Stone of Echo kept sending out distress signals, waiting for the day when they returned to the fertile plains and found her again. "Did you save me?" Yes, now that she had escaped from the ice barrier, the only possibility was that the witch army had returned. "Have the demons retreated? Have we won?" "Holy City, how is the Holy City of Tequila?" After blurting out this series of questions, she saw the faces of the witches change. They looked at each other with joy and excitement. A mature-looking witch with long reddish-brown hair could not help but ask, "We did find you in the basement of a stone tower. Are you really from 450 years ago?" The person who asked the question reminded her of the blessed warrior who turned the tide. That person's hair was the same, like a flame that illuminated one's heart. Compared to the gray-haired man, she was more willing to answer the witch's question. Although she usually didn't care about her status, being stared at by a lowly person always made her feel offended. If it was someone else, this man would most likely be severely punished. "My name is Agatha, a witch of the Tequila Quest Society." She paused for a moment. "What do you mean by 450 years ago? Have you been fighting the demons for more than 400 years? This is impossible. You've slept for too long." things might be a little different from what you think. The man who called himself Roland said, "If you feel that your body is fine, we can slowly tell you. Speak." Agatha closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Although this prince behaved very rudely, she did not have the time to care about this. As he began to explain the history of Grey Castle and the evolution of the continent's 4 kingdoms, she felt cold sweat gradually appear on her back. In his narration, Agatha quickly found a few corresponding signs, such as the concealing forest, and the impassable mountain range. But when she put these signs into her memory, the conclusion she obtained shocked her. If the names of the places matched, the so-called 4 kingdoms were nothing more than the former barbarian land, a narrow strip between the mountains and the sea. In their eyes, it was a barren land with no development value. And the barbarian land he mentioned turned out to be the fertile plains that she was familiar with. As for the holy city of Tequila, it had long become an unknown area. With the passage of time, it was buried in the depths of the fertile plains. How ridiculous was this? However, the more ridiculous thing was yet to come. Buried together with Tequila was the status of witches. According to him, witches had unexpectedly become the target of everyone's humiliation. In the 4 kingdoms, the political power was firmly controlled by ordinary people. They called themselves kings and nobles, which was completely the same old thing from before the first battle of divine will. But it was this group of old antiques that became the rulers who stepped on the witches' heads. How could this be possible? Presumptuous. She could not help but interrupt. Witches were actually hunted by ordinary people? Who has the courage to do so? In anger, Agatha forced herself to stretch out her hand, wanting to teach this man a lesson for talking nonsense, but she did not expect that her magic power could not turn into frost like usual. At this time, she felt that there was a metal ring on her ankle. She lifted the quilt and saw that the stone embedded in it was a god's stone of retaliation. Are you crazy? She looked at the group of witches in disbelief. You actually helped an ordinary person to deal with a high awakened, and you violated the Union's ban by using God's stone of retaliation without authorization. Only the Union's law enforcement team was allowed to use God's stones. In addition, anyone who carried, sold, modified, or destroyed God's stones would be severely punished, or even sentenced to death. The prince sighed, I'm worried about this. Don't worry, I'll talk to her. The red-haired witch sat on the bed and covered her with the quilt again. My name is Vendi, things are not what you think, and what he said is the truth. I don't know what the holy city you lived in 450 years ago was like, but today, Tequila no longer exists, and the Union you mentioned has never been heard of. We have been living in hiding until we met His Highness Roland. He gave us a stable place to live and encouraged us to use our abilities. At the same time, we studied how to better use our abilities to change the world. Here, we can live freely like ordinary people. We don't need to hide, and we don't need to worry about being hunted and killed by the church or the people. You know, nowadays, God's stones of retaliation are everywhere, and after a witch loses her ability, she is not much stronger than an ordinary person. After listening to Vendi's story, Agatha was completely silent. The Union was a huge organization led by several witch kingdoms, with many high witches and extraordinaries. In order to win the battle of divine will and unite the power, the Union formed an extremely large army, and also controlled every holy city. They were responsible for training and dispatching witches, dealing with disputes, and maintaining the stability and order of the city. Only they had the power to arrest and put a witch on trial. However, such a powerful organization, until now, no one had heard of their name. What about the fugitives who wanted to restore order? Where are they now? You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.